I was going to say, I'm not even sure I know what these words mean. However, if you start with one of the things I like to say is the person is the nexus and or locus of all meaning. So what do these things mean? I'll tell you what they mean, because what do they mean to me? And first off, I made here's a little thing. Here we got a little, so we're going to go with George MacDonald's Awakening. Meaning is awakened. Talk about monism, dualism, and the Tao. We're going to talk about bodies. That's kind of the broader mosaic that I was talking about. And all of that is kind of within the, kind of under this thing of like conversational hospitality, or how to have a good conversation, or as Rod Hare says, the beginning of his thinking with his project called the Nuance Forum is when it started with this, the idea of stemming from this question is, when is the last time you had a good conversation? Which is a really great, what's up, Mark? Which is a really great thing to think about. When is the last time that you had a good conversation? And what entails a good conversation? It's kind of and then a question related to that is, are you the kind of person that can foster a good conversation, bring about a good conversation, not force a good conversation, but bring about a good conversation in different cultural, socioeconomic, ideological contexts? Is that something you're able to do? It's something I really strive to do, and there's areas where I have a ton of improvement to do, and a lot of it comes, I think, to really good listening. I think a lot of it comes down to really good listening, and it's related to I watched PVK's Homeroom as I was making breakfast this morning and coffee and things, and listened to it, and it's what's the title of it? It was clickbait title. PVK is good at these clickbait titles, but it was something like, has Jordan Peterson become Fat Thor? And increasingly, I mean, over time, so this has happened for me too. There was the Jordan Peterson spark at what time? 2016, 2017, something like that, stemming after his big video. I mean, there were a few minor people following him. I know a few people in the corner, like Sam Tiedemann, and which also, I'm pretty sure it's Tiedemann, Chad. Neil was right. I think you're wrong, but I think you repented. Good work. Sam's the only one I know of. There's a few other. Maybe McBow was too. There was a number of people who were into Peterson before he was ever on Rogan. I discovered him on Rogan, and there was this big blow up. And this gets at one of the. So, well, okay. Let me finish the thought. And so, but now he's, I don't know. People have lost interest in him. He's no longer salient, or he's just not interesting, or he is kind of interesting, but like in a, I don't know, just consuming information way. And this kind of gets at the difference. I tweeted, I commented the other day, which I'm not on there very much because I just don't find it that beneficial. It's just not my primary medium, I think, is talking to people in video or live streaming or not being online. And my best medium is in real life. I mean, put in the comments if you met me in real life. It's better. And that kind of goes through the hierarchy of, I think, different mediums. And medium is the message, and what mediums are able to communicate and carry the message. I mean, I'm always going to talk about McLuhan and medium and message, and which is very related to the title of information and meaning. and in what mediums is meaning communicated best, and in what mediums is information. I would say is information, I don't know, bought and exchanged almost. It's almost like there's an ecology of information, and information. I think I would propose that information economies and ecologies are fundamentally rooted in substance ontology and not relational ontology, and that's why they're fundamentally bankrupt. Although you will always find God is everywhere, truth is everywhere, and therefore truth, goodness, all those things are everywhere, and you can find them. But as a rule, I think information economies and ecologies are rooted toward misunderstanding and babble because you're assuming some sort of you're assuming an objectivity to information, to language, to definitions, to truth. You're assuming some kind of absolute truth, and they're things that you think you can move around and arrange, versus understanding that all these things are fluid because they're relations, because everything is a relation. I mean, that's the big idea of this. Everything is a relation. Nothing exists per se in and of itself, except I suppose in classical theology they would say God, but even God does not exist in and of himself in a quantitative one monistic way, because God is a unitive relation, which is part of the whole idea of Trinitarian theology. Nothing exists in and of itself. It's very, and the way I most like to illustrate this is this. This is one of the things that I want to talk about on here. I'll find it on my phone. It's a picture I have saved of this thing. And it's not my favorite because it's just an illustration between dualism and monism. But see, even the monisms are not monisms. You know, even the dark is not darkness to you. So there isn't such a thing as just like a static monad. And I've talked about this a lot, because if you just have like you can't even talk about these things meaningfully, because if you're talking about a static monad, you're losing duality. You're losing context, and there is no text without a context. That's one of my Lucasms. So if the best way to understand it probably is, and this isn't even it, it's further than this, but it's the singularity before the Big Bang. The singularity before the Big Bang is probably the greatest thing that we have conceptually that you can point to that would be a static monad, except it's not a static monad because it didn't stay the singularity. It expanded into everything that is. And so, and that reminds me of that great, Pete Holmes has a really great joke about this, where like nothingness creating everythingness, and when you die, you go back to the nothingness. He's like, sounds a lot like God. But that's the idea of the singularity. But the singularity isn't, you can't conceive of something that has just one variable without any context, because you couldn't even talk about it. There is no there's another way to say it. There is no being with a static monad. You couldn't even conceive of it because there's nothing outside of it. There is no perspective. There's no perception, because perceiving what? It's one. There is nothing. It's not a relational unity. Not even God would be that way, because nothing, the singularity before the Big Bang, if it didn't have potency that could manifest into actuality, so it has to have a latent, unmanifested potency, or else we wouldn't have creation. We wouldn't have reality. There wouldn't be anything, or this would be all delusion, and then you get into like Eastern monism, where like this isn't real. And I don't even think, I don't want to speak for Eastern monism, because I feel like it's such an ancient, old, rooted, long-standing philosophical and religious tradition that, and one of my things that I've gotten from Peugeot that I think is true is you can't really understand anything apart from initiation. From standing outside of it, it seems to me to be absurd, and not absurd in the kind of way that is paradoxical and lends toward some sort of understanding or coherence or I don't know, legitimacy, but I mean, of course, I wouldn't understand that from outside the fire. So outside, sorry, it's Garth Brooks. Life is not tried; it's merely survived. If you're standing outside the fire. So that's monism, and so monism makes no sense, like a true monism. This is why you have to have either some kind of dynamic monism, or what was Sam was going through David Bentley Hart's. He had a lecture series on his, I think it's toward a monistic Christology. But even in that, when you're talking about Christ from a Christian perspective, Son of God, God the Father and Son, there inherently is a dualism because there's two. And so what is a monistic Christology? What is that? Go check out Sam's channel where he goes through those lectures. And I do believe, I think I can say this, that I think if it doesn't fall through, I think Sam's going to talk to David Bentley Hart, I believe, on the books. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say that. So there is no static monism. And dualism, I've always said this, it's dualism, like if you have two things, right, there's an implied third. So like if you have two, white and dark, there's an implied third, which is the sheet of paper. It's the context which you can even make the distinction of the two. So that's behind any and all distinctions, there's a hidden unity. Right and the left hand of God. So there's the right hand of God, justice, mercy, light, dark. Behind that, there's a unity. There's a higher apophatic implied unity, which is the body. And so here we're filling on the other thing, the bodies. Bodies are unities of multiplicity. That's what a body is. They're not merely material, because philosophical materialism is an infinite regress and doesn't make any sense. Because you got to have emanation and emergence, spirit and physical material. And so there are corporate bodies, Peugeot has talked about this a lot. America, I would say American corporations are spiritual bodies. They also have physical instantiations. You think of like America. America is a spiritual body. It also has physical bodies. You could point to like the Pentagon or the White House or the president or the different buildings, the people that are in those buildings. Those are part of the multiplicity of the greater thing, which is America. The land that we're a part of, but it's a spiritual body, which is what I've often like. A spiritual body or a soul or something is the thing that persists through time, through like chronos, the temporality of time, and maintains a unitive whole. That you use that the ship. I brought the ship the other time, and McMo told me what it was, but it's the same thing as like your physical body. Your physical body exchanges atoms and throughout time. So like the atoms that are in your body now are not the same atoms that were in your body before, but yet you are you. And so what is that? Well, that's a spiritual body through time. And it is in a constant flow, a relationship with your environment, with your mother to greater and lesser degrees, with your father, with your community, with the food. And you take things in, you take things out. Breath happens constantly. Breathe in, breathe out. You're exchanging atoms and molecules. Your body's in total flux, but on a scale of time, it changes and evolves. So like you can look at me, you can see pictures of me when I'm a little kid. And let's illustrate this. And there are pictures of me when I'm a little kid. This is my little picture when I was a little kid. This is a very, see, look at it. Does that look like me? All the molecules are different, but does that look like me? It's a very important one. This is when I got my peach suit because I've always loved clothes. I've always loved fashion. That's another overlap I have with my boys, Chezi. Although Chezi, I mean, he's a dapper darling. He's a dapper young man. He's a dashing young man, collective soul. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. The collective soul. I mean, Tom Selleck's pretty awesome. Ethan has admitted he has more clothes than his fiance wife. And so Yeah, I've always liked close, but then that. So like you can see in that, maybe if you have eyes to see, like if you saw that picture and you didn't really know me very well, we're going to get back to meaning and relation and knowing as you are known, because that's the goal of this stream. If you saw that and you just be like, oh, look at that's little Luke, and oh, there are things that are similar to him and different, sometimes maybe you gain a lot of weight, maybe you lose a lot of weight. Are you the same person? What makes you the same person throughout time? What is that? On a philosophical materialism thing, like if you think it's merely emergent matter, and that like any sort of spiritual or abstract patterns, I mean, even Plato, if you don't believe in any of that stuff up here, I mean, to me, it doesn't it doesn't make any sense. So, all right. So that's a lot of whatever philosophy, abstract thinking. I mean, although touching, listen, Notes from a Tilt-A-Whirl. That's also one of my bingo cards. I love that book. It's how my mind works. Circling big, illustrating, circling little. Big, little, Infinity, without change, becoming man, It's called the incarnation. And here we go. Here's another bingo. Jordan Daniel Wood's Maximus, The Whole Mystery of Christ, his quote. Let me see if I can remember it. The Maximus Ambiguum, St. Maximus, that he said his whole book is just trying to illustrate this one phrase from Maximus, which is that the will of God, very God, no, the word of God, there we go. The word of God, very God, wills always and in all things to actualize the mystery of the incarnation, which is why it's fractal, which is why we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, which are probably messiahs all around us. C.S. Lewis talked about this. Like if you really had eyes to see the human beings that you're surrounded by and what they really are and what they're capable of and maybe where they're heading. Sam's also going to be coming out with this video, another video coming out, which is a riff on evolution and like his perfect polar bear, which is also Whitestone name, which gets at what's in a name, which is probably just a conversation I need to schedule and have with Chezi, if for nothing else. I mean, that's kind of like an informational thing, but it will also be a relational thing because I like that guy of like what's in a name, the Shakespeare, Umberto Eco, The Name of the Rose, naming. What is a name? So this is something that came up. I did want to touch on this, and we will get back to information and meaning, and then good conversations. Because ultimately, where I'm going with this is to circle all the way back to Jordan Peterson and what I said. I never finished even that thought that I said on Twitter that PVK is essentially the overtly religious Joe Rogan. I think PVK is modeling with the randos and with the TLC how to have a good conversation about religious topics, and it's going to touch on many different topics. But the reason PVK is really good at this is because whether or not we could articulate this and we're self-aware and conscious of this in the beginning, TLC has always been a person's first community, an online community. It's persons first, although we have people within the community that are information that want it to be an information first thing. But again, my point is that information first is fundamentally rooted. This is why I say the road to hell is paved with first principles, is rooted in the assumption, the tacit assumption of an objective reality, which implies substance ontology, which is dead, which leads to nihilism. Objectivism leads to nihilism. Relational ontology means that all truth is relative but not arbitrary, which is also tied to faithful innovation being what should be the goal of all true, good, beautiful, healthy bodies, including the physical and the spiritual bodies. Faithful innovation, because you want to be faithful. Trying to illustrate it even really simply, trying to be faithful to your own body means I don't want to make decisions with my imagination, with my mind, with that thing that can project into the future in Chronos, because you have this plethora of options available to you. Sorry, need a cough button. You have this plethora of options to you, and then you want to the best of your ability, make decisions that are that have the most loving relationship to the sustenance and health of your own body. So if with your body, I feel like there's Bible verses coming to mind there that are underneath there that I just can't. What is the verse? This is probably why I should be reading more Bible than I do anymore. Back to my old school. Listen, it's a strength of some evangelical communities. But with your body, if you eat good food, if you maybe do breathing things, if you get good sleep, if you make all these choices with your body projecting in the future consistently, then you're faithful to your body. Your body also is you maybe get new ideas, like maybe I need to change this, maybe I need to change this about my diet, maybe I need to change this pattern and repent of the pattern you're in, change it to a different pattern, and then that is a metamorphosis. So let's go back to the Maximus, that the Word of God, very God, wills always and in all things to actualize the mystery of the incarnation, to bring down into being, not counting equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking on the form of a servant, so then it could be perfected through his obedience. That's what we're trying to do all the time. So like you have this image out there where you're imagining yourself in the future better, right? I mean, something better. We're all oriented toward the better. Even when we're deceived, you're oriented toward the better. Who said that the other day? Satan can only use the good to deceive you. I mean, unless you're a psychopath, I suppose. Maybe that's the exception. I don't know. But like, you can only be deceived by the good. You think this is good, but it's not. And then, and so you're orienting toward that. And then slowly your body, your physical body, but also your spiritual body is transformed. And part of that just happens naturally through aging, through interacting with different environments, and you're aged and you're changed and you're morphed and you're molded over time. Theoretically, your soul and your spirit is doing that as you submit yourself to patterns of holiness and love. I feel like that's pretty obvious. And so, okay, let's get back to good conversations. I have to fulfill the title on this with the awakening quote, the McDonald Awakening. So Malcolm Guite in a lecture, I can't remember where it is. If you type in Malcolm Guite, George MacDonald, I can't remember what it's from though. But he had this banger of a quote, because a lot of what Guite has gotten is from MacDonald, and me too. I mean, MacDonald is basically like a church father to me. Like he's, I don't know anything that the dude has ever said that is bad. Like he's so good in everything. But he said, it's just my remembrance of it is that you never convey meaning. You can only awaken meaning, which is the parable of the sower, right? You can sow seeds. So you sow seeds, and if those seeds resonate, if they are welcomed, if they are received as a gift by the soil, they sprout, they die, and they bring forth much fruit, right? That's what happens. But the seeds are sometimes rejected by the soil because either it's rocky, or they spring up and they have no root and they're scorched by the sun and they die, or birds come and eat them, and predators come and eat them, the seeds. But the seeds who stay, that are received by the soil, they bring forth much fruit. So when MacDonald says that meaning is not conveyed, that would be information. You can convey information. You can transactionalize information. I can give you information. I can give you this definition. What do you mean by that? If you just give me a definition, you're not conveying meaning, you're conveying information. You can just hand someone information. It's like this, it's a transaction. Here you go, take my meaning. And then you can just repeat it. But is that meaning yours? What's the Grimm quote? It's Hezi. What's the Grimm quote? Where like if you receive something, it's yours, or something like that. Can't remember what it is. I'm bad at repeating other people's aphorisms. But that's true, because then it becomes your own thing. Meaning is intrinsically yours, which I'm not saying in like an individualistic way, because no man is an island. It's because everything is a relation. There isn't anything that exists in and of itself, a aseity, even God in a way, unless you want to put it in a Trinitarian frame. And so this awakened meaning in you is something that is related to what somebody else has said, but it's also fundamentally yours, because boom, the light bulb goes on. Meaning is awakened in you. And it's emanating, it's coming from outside, but it's also coming from within. Receive with meekness. This is one of those like Christian koans. Receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. I think that's the exact same thing. It's saying the exact same thing as that Maximus Ambiguum, that the word of God, very God, wills always and in all things to actualize the mystery of his incarnation. The logos everywhere. Anything that has being is the divine spark, to use Jewish language, the imago Dei, icons of God. Why you exist, and this is why I don't ultimately believe in certain aspects of total depravity that imply original guilt, because they don't have any ontology. How do you exist if you are completely corrupt, and if there is no logos, no image of God, no icon, no divine spark within you that actually has being, even if it's maybe corrupted, But like that ontology sucks. It doesn't work. That's why I call it POS theology. Okay, what is all this? I'm going to open this up, because what does all this have to do with hospitality, having a good conversation? And Jordan Peterson being fat Thor. So PVK, the one comment I made on his video this morning is he said, recently Jordan Peterson's been doing a lot of, and it doesn't work. He'll just be like, so I've been thinking this, and tell me what you think about it. So he will throw out an idea. But here's what he's doing. I think it's almost, I said I got the image of like somebody playing tennis with a wall. He's using you as a sounding board. He's saying, I'm thinking this, and then boom, what do you think about it? So repeat back to me, so that he's basically wants you as a foil. It's like he wants to play, I don't know, what would be the illustration? He'd just be like, it's like a little kid who wants to play house, but they want to dictate everything about the house. And he's doing it in a very mature, and Peterson doesn't do this all the time, but as a rule, I think when his conversations aren't interesting is when they're not conversations. When he's not taking his own advice and really being interested in what the other person has to say, like assuming the other person has something to teach you. I think he does know that, because he knows that's a Sunday school answer. It's in his own damn book, and he said it. But very often he doesn't act that way. And that's a great thing we've learned from Jordan Peterson, is act as what you believe is what you act. What you truly believe is what you act. And the truly integrated person, this is a conversation I had in a group chat. An integrated person, their speech and their action are one. That's what it means to have integrity. When your word is your bond, when what you say is what you do fully, you're not a hypocrite. And so when you fully act like the other person has something to say to you, you're not just waiting for your time to speak. You're not steamrolling. You're not monopolizing the conversation. You're not the only one talking. You ask genuine questions that aren't rhetorical questions, and you're genuinely interested in what the other person has to say. Now, all this is complicated because temperament comes in there. Some people, myself, I'm highly enthusiastic. I get very excitable. I love talking about ideas. And so sometimes in conversations, like my wife, she will say that I have a way of breathing where I can breathe and continue talking and not give any space for the other person to talk when I'm really excited. I mean, that's okay. It's okay. I don't necessarily need to feel bad about that. But I also need to recognize if I don't allow space for somebody else to talk, I'm not really having a conversation. They're just a sounding board. I'm just talking at them. And I need to shut up. I need to be silent. Breathe in, breathe out. That's important. I need to do more breathing in. Listening, 2 ears, 1 mouth kind of a thing. And Being excited is fine, but self-control, Chris Green thing. Somebody told me I need to watch another Chris Green thing. Chris Green's greatest sermon ever made, says Nate Heil, is he says the pinnacle of Christian virtue is self-control. And even self-control is a bit of a koan. How controlling yourself? How? What within the self controls the self? It's like it's a self-resolving paradox, to quote Christopher Langan, to quote my friend Cal, quoting Christopher Langan. It's the CTMU, the cognitive theoretical model of the universe, CT. Yeah, that's his basic idea of what it is a self-resolving paradox, which I think is the relational ontology of the ineffable, but effable. What's the opposite? Can you just say effable? Like able to be ineffable, can't be spoken, written, communicated, but effability would be the ability to be communicated, written, spoken. Because that is the paradox of even, that's one of my favorite lines from the Divine Liturgy of, speaking of Christ, who without change became man and was crucified. Chronos and Kairos. Or Charles Williams, my boy Chris Young started reading, he's going to finish it before I will, no doubt, Charles Williams' Descent of the Dove, because that's one of the things that Maximus Ambiguum, that the word of God, very God, wills always and in all things to actualize the mystery of his incarnation, even in time. So does God exist out of time? Yeah, he also exists in time. And so we're redeeming time. That's part of it. Okay, circling back. So having a good conversation involves shutting up. I watch all these dynamics. Like I do believe this is a huge difference between TLC and Christian YouTube. Christian YouTube is an information economy. It's about information. It's apologetics. It's talking points. It's either or. It's winners and losers. That's information economies are just within that realm. I think scholasticism is an information economy. I don't think you can actually have true education in an information economy. I think because the tacit dimension, Polanyi, the thing that's behind it, the medium, the space, the spiritual womb of an information economy is assuming objectivism, which is substance ontology, and it's wrong. It's not rooted in love. Again, it's the monism. There are no subjects. Monism, dual. If there are substances, it's implying relations. It's relationships all the way down. It's persons all the way down. It's like hats in my last live stream. Hats all the way down. I'm sure. Listen, there's a very different side to YouTube. It's exceptions and rules, but the exceptions prove the rule. I mean, and I only know what I know. And what I know, why I talk about TLC and the way that I talk about TLC is that I think it is rooted in relationships. But what's the Rod axiom of I need to remember it. The quality of a relationship is inversely proportional to the amount of subjects that are off the table. I think that's it. Isn't that it? The quality of a relationship is inversely Rod, if this is wrong and you're in here, correct me, proportional to the number of subjects that are off the table. I think that's it. If it's wrong, somebody correct me in the thing. But what's behind that? I agree. I think that's true. So what things can't you talk about with someone? Why? It's because if you can't talk about a subject with someone, it's because they're married to their ideas. That's what Rogan says. Their identity is so wedded to a particular idea or a particular conclusion or a particular principle. This is why the road to hell is paved with first principles. It is so connected to an idea that you say, I will die for this versus the relationship. The relationship is on the altar. The person is on the altar. Essentially, if you're sacrificing the relationship, you're saying, I will I will leave you behind for this idea. This is why Christ and Antichrist are a hair's breadth away, because there are many Christians, many Christians, who will sacrifice relationships for ideas, and I think that's diabolical. On its face, it's diabolical. It divides. Now this is where it's the non-duality that includes duality. Do I think that you should have convictions about certain ideas, moralities, politics, whatever? Yes. This is why I love the book Silence. But at the end of the day, I think some of the most baller Christian stuff could be is a willingness to be wrong and to die to yourself and become a living sacrifice. To die to these ideas and abstractions that you think are most central in the name of love. In the name of love, one night in the name of love. I do like that song, but One Night in the Name of Love, that seems fickle, seems transitory. Just one night? How about a lifetime of love? How about forever? All right, and I think sometimes having a good conversation. Oh, this is the last thing I want to say. So I think that's the right comment. Rod, if I'm wrong, put in the comments. Either put in the live comments, put in the video comments. Timestamp it, correct me. McMo shared with me. I don't even think McMo. I haven't seen you yet. I don't think you're here. But he shared with me. I didn't put this in the description, so I'm gonna pull it up in my. Also, Minnesota beat LA. Sorry. So go Timberwolves. Jess, good to see you. Is that the lyric? In the name of love? One more in the name of love? Isn't it one night in the name of love? Maybe I don't remember the lyric. Okay. So it's this one. This is, you'll also see all my YouTube history. So it's like basketball, Griswold Grimm, PVK, and then the end of an era, Theory Underground. So I want to talk about this video. I don't know when it came out, pretty recently, but McMo said it's an area that Parsons for Geist, I think, who's often in here. I haven't seen him around recently. Forget his actual name. I mean, he's come on to a lot of streams, but I haven't developed a personal relationship with him. It's just been a fits and starts one. He's a very Peter Rollins. He's in like the Rollins side of the corner, which I am. And Jess is also a Rollins guy. McMo's a Rollins guy. But this Theory Underground is it's kind of a parallel online community that I guess went through some shit. Had a lot of I don't know. Essentially, they collapsed. Essentially, it's that. It's the where's my thing? There were, and I self-admittedly, the guy who put on that video, there were a couple other major persons in the Theory Underground, and they were supported by a community, and they built up this thing, and there was money involved, and they were trying to get this guy full-time wages, which you're still a wage slave if you're just getting paid by doing this. It's something you love, but if you're still, this is why, what's the term for that when you like become audience capture? Because it's that Upton Sinclair quote that I like. See, I'm too excited. I can't even speak. That it's hard to get a man to see something when his salary, or it's hard to get a man to understand something. You could say see it too. Understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. That's audience capture. And it's not necessarily money. Money's the easy thing with it. It could be status. It could be influence. It could be reputation. Whatever. All of those things. If the relationships that are around you, if any of those things start to collapse, and then you give up your integrity for that. And again, is that contrary to what I was just saying? Like this is Job. Yes, I'm going to bring up Job, and you're going to have to come in here, and we're all going to have to talk about this and figure it out together, because when do you die to your convictions and when do you not? Integrity. because that's the thing. This is related to will. This is related. I mean, these are things for which I don't have answers. Seriously, is like, when do you when do you say, I'm gonna lay this conviction on the altar in the name of love, a la silence, you know, like at the very end, like trample, it's for this reason I came into the world. When do you apostatize in the name of love? I mean, that's the question. And when do you not? When do you hold to your convictions and say, like, I'm not, like Job, I'm not gonna, I haven't done anything wrong, I don't know what to tell you. Are those different things? I feel like they're different things, because that came up with the Theory Underground thing, because that's one of the things that where everything fell apart, is the guy who, I don't know his name, but like the guy who did that video that I said, is there was another guy who he was partnering with for this, and then I think another woman. They were the three main players, and then they were getting a lot of support from the community. I mean, I'm sure it was the same shtick that everybody's doing: Patreon, Ko-Fi, buy me a coffee, whatever. I don't know. And this is why, like, I really do believe, and maybe I'm a liar, maybe I'm ignorant, maybe I don't know the future. I don't care how, like, successful this would ever get, how many viewers I would get, how popular I would get. I don't think I'm open to being corrected with this. I ever want money to be a part of this. I don't think I ever want to make money from TLC. I don't think so. I don't. I think money corrupts things, and there's reasons for that. Although 98th percentile openness, I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to being corrected about it, Wouldn't be the first time. But so they had a falling out. Like, something happened, and he said he's the kind of guy where, that was a big part of that video. He said, I'm the kind of guy where when I think I'm right, like, I don't back down. But it collapsed the relationships. And he basically said, McMo sent it to me, because he said, I think there's a lot of parallels with or not parallels, but like similarities with what went on in that community with TLC. And he said, essentially what happened in that community is they put on a lot of structure. They tried to make something of it in an absolutizing way. Like, they tried to make the whole thing. They did not what PBK has done, which is just done what he wants to do. He just makes videos and talks about what he wants to talk about. And he just talks to the people he wants to talk about. He has randos videos. PBK just basically does what he wants, and he plays. And from that, this community has emerged, because TLC is a PBK community. Yeah, there's Jordan Peterson. Yeah, there's Peugeot. Yeah, there's Vervaeke. TLC is PBK. That's a hill I will die on. Is it? I don't know. But I believe that. That's my conviction. And there's been many people, primarily Jacob, PBK's talked about this in videos, but a lot of other people too, who are like, what is this? What are we doing with this? Let's make this into something. Let's put some structure on this. Let's do something. And PBK has kind of always resisted that and said, Jess, I see you can come in. And PBK has always said, I don't want to do that. If you guys want to do something and team up and make something and build something, awesome. I'll support you in whatever way you can. But essentially, PBK has said, I don't want to monopolize the entirety of the TLC and like have it be like, this is the one thing we're doing. Essentially what I think that is PBK has said, I don't want to overstress emanation versus emergence. I think that's all that is. And a lot of people are annoyed with PBK about that. I think it's primarily temperamental. I think it's largely people who are more inclined to order and structuralism. It's people that are temperamentally conservative. And although like everyone in the corner, they have high openness, or else they couldn't stand this place. But they're temperamentally conservative. And PBK has just said no. I think Theory Underground went the other route, where they put a lot more structure on it and made the whole thing into a thing, and it collapsed. Hey, Jess, what do you think about all this? I'm going to look at some.
I don't know, but you mentioned Job, and then you called me out.
Yeah, so I mean, we could talk about that.
Materialized.
You're obviously the Job guy. So, what is the line with So I mean, remember the whole frame. It's substance ontology versus relational ontology, and love and hospitality. What is the line between holding your convictions in integrity and sacrificing what you think you believe for the sake of the other?
Yeah. I think Jordan Hall was talking about this in this video I was watching the other day, where like so here's the pattern. You're so you do whatever you want first, and then you realize that
Authenticity.
that doesn't lead to anything. So what you have to do is you actually have to lay that down. You have to be self-sacrificing for the other, right? So then you're aware that yourself is this one thing, and then you're doing this self-sacrifice, but then that becomes yourself. The self-sacrifice becomes yourself, and then how do you sacrifice that? How do you if you become the one that's self-sacrificing, how do you sacrifice your self-sacrificing?
I mean, so here's the thing. That sounds like TLC Christian-y gobbledygook for sure.
Mhm.
However, at the same time, there's something deep in my soul. There's meaning being awakened where I feel like what you just said is exactly the lesson that I need to be learning at this point in my life. Say it again.
Well, it's just like you'll if you take anything and put it at the top, and maybe this is just taking any proposition, even the proposition of self-sacrifice, and putting it at the top, you'll reach a paradox at some point where, let's
Because
say
self-sacrifice, just as an idea, isn't an act as if. Because
yeah,
that's the thing. Because
well,
if
you get
belief is really act as if and self-sacrifice is at your top, what do you do when somebody disagrees with you? Sacrifice that?
well, I mean, it's just logically, like, if you identify as someone who self-sacrifices, then that's yourself. Then how do you sacrifice that self?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think it's just okay, so that's one thing that came to mind. The other thing that came to mind is I'm reading this book. It's a lot of the stuff in it is too um what is it, academic
Too
for
high
me.
for me?
It's too academic, and the guy who
What's the
wrote
book
it, like,
again?
knows. Huh?
What's the book?
It's called Job in Wonderland, and it's a comparison of the book of Job and Alice in Wonderland, and
Holy cow, that
really
sounds awesome. Maybe you should do LSD and read it.
it's looking at Job as a parody. And
Mm.
there's a lot of that in there, because, like, you just see basically things flipped on their heads. So, in the Garden of Eden, the the snake tempts Eve and Adam to eat the fruit, tempts them. In the book of Job, Satan is talking to God, tempting God to destroy Job. And so that's one reversal. Another one is that um oh, it slipped my mind. Anyway, so you have he talks about the book of Job acting as parody. And then there's a lot of stuff in the Hebrew where um it's notoriously difficult to translate Job because some of it's not clear, and his argument is it's written purposely unclear, that
I'm like the living book of Job.
if there's a word that the poet could use that would have, like, one meaning or another, he would use that word specifically because it had that multivalence to it, especially if it was a word that could mean the exact opposite of itself.
Oh, I love
So
that shit.
so
That is
like
my vibe.
in the very beginning, when it says uh Satan says to God, if you take away all his belongings, he will curse you to your face. And the word there isn't curse in Hebrew. The word there is bless. So literally it says, uh, Job will bless you to your face. Like, even if you did something terrible to him, he will bless you still.
Job.
Yeah. And this is supposed it and so it gets translated curse because it's actually, people come up with weird ideas about, I don't know if they're weird or not. They're probably good ideas.
Isn't there's some to
Why it
put
gets translated curse. And even his wife, when she says to curse God and die, she doesn't say curse literally. She says bless God and die.
I feel like Hebrew is just full of that stuff, though. Where like
But
the
the
meaning is
context of
completely
it,
contextual. Yeah.
yeah, well, and the context of it is it's meant to be understood as curse. One of the reasons is because you're not supposed to put the word curse that close to the word God.
But it's probably like the Tao though. But like the other option, although it's primarily meant to be that, the other option's still there.
Yeah, but it's also like we have this in our language. Like it's like someone does something unhelpful, and you go, "Oh, thank you very much." Like we don't literally mean "thank you very much." We mean that was, why did you do that?
Yeah.
And it's
Screw
understood
you.
that way. And like if someone comes along 100 years later and we, here's the conversation, like he said thank you very much after he did that terrible thing. Like, what do you think that means? Like,
Yeah.
no, I literally meant, like I actually meant, I literally meant thank you. I
Yeah.
actually meant you're an idiot.
Yeah, you can do all of that. Like the dualities are present in everything, like meme
Yeah.
culture, GIFs, but in writing you can do it too. It's just more difficult to see in writing sometimes.
Yeah. And so he thinks that, well, he has this view that the book of Job, at least part of what it's doing is, it's taking on the whole wisdom tradition, and the wisdom tradition is serious and it's very abstracted and whatever. And basically, the book of Job is there to take the whole thing to task, because the friends are essentially arguing sort of the wisdom of Proverbs,
Yeah.
and they're wrong. Like they're just, the facts are they're wrong, but they don't know they're wrong, and that's part of the humor of it. And then Job, all it is Job's word against them. And like, what are you supposed to do about that? Like, are the friends just supposed to say like, I mean, Job's been good, like we should just assume it? Or is it the chance that, Job's the one that's wrong? But
Okay.
it's this. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, let's pause because I do want to open this up in a little while. I got to take a potty break, but I think this is a new person. Listen, what's this live about? If you're new here and you don't know what this is about, I'm very excited.
Hang on.
Hang on. Turn your hat around backwards. We're about to get
Hold on to your
serious.
butts.
Hold on to your butts. So like that's even that question. How would you even describe what is this about, Jess? What are we doing?
Who knows, man? Who knows?
I mean, it's hard because you're going to come in here. This is like how PVK will talk about how hierarchy's mind and blind, but it's about hospitality too, because like I want this to be a hospitable place. So even like this with Jessica, if you're still here and you didn't click away already, I would love for you.
She's probably a bot.
Maybe. Listen, this is
Look,
like
bots are people too these days.
what was that old bot on the Bridges of Meaning Discord? Like Kami. Do you remember what I'm talking about? There was some bot like way back in the early days that like everybody was just like, what is this thing? Who knows? And I just was consistently reaching out to them and trying to befriend them and trying to understand them. And everyone was like, Luke, this is a bot. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Okay.
She's here.
She says she's still here. So this is what I would say this is I am part of a broader emerging online community of people that started talking about a bunch of ideas, but then all became friends. And now we have relationships that transcend this platform, of which YouTube live streaming is one of them. But like Jess and I have each other's phone numbers. We've met each other in real life. Someday I'm going to go down to, I don't think this is giving anything away because you have a KC on your hat, to Kansas City and visit you and your family. He's going to feed me barbecue. We have kids about the same age. So this is what's crazy. I do want to take so sorry, I got to finish the thing with Jessica, and then I'm going to talk to Jess more about. I'm going to pivot the topic, but
You're
when I talk
such an
about
evangelical, like you derail the conversation for a guest.
yes, but that's because I don't care. I care about persons, not information. I care about persons, not information. And Jessica's a person, and I will leave the 99 for the one. So, all right. So I want to talk about technology and my son. We cannot, you know his name, but I don't want to mention his name. I keep some privacy lines around my family, but and because this is what I was thinking as I was talking about you. You're one of my favorite people in the world. Like you are. I really like you.
Thanks. You're one of
And
my
I
favorite
think
people.
and I think you're lovely. And when we hung out in Olympia, like especially like at the VIP dinner, and then when we went out to dinner that one night, it was so much fun. Hanging out with you and your wife was like some of my favorite times up there.
I
We just
laughed the entire time.
yeah, it was so good. And I often think that because something my wife and I have often talked about is we dream. Yeah, exactly. That's hilarious, Noah. So Jessica, all these people that are in the comments, I know many of these people. This is Harris. I don't know that I know Almighty Ohm's real name, but I see him around all the time. Jeremy, I know I've met in real life. Mark, I know. Corner Citizen's name is Alan. I know all these people. Afriel, I know his real name, but I don't know that that's really that public. Mark S, I know. These are all my friends. But they're a weird kind of new friend that's an internet friend. But it's not an internet friend that's rooted in ideology or information or we have all the same opinions and ideas. There is some of that because it's always a little bit of that and other stuff. We talk about theology, we talk about philosophy, we talk about politics, but we also talk about music, we talk about comedy, we have stupid humor. We're all buddies. But then here's where I want to go with this is my son is currently struggling in the world and in some ways, and it's really hard. I find this really hard. You'll resonate this parenting in an in the internet age and in the cell phone age and the social media age, and increasingly people are living less of their life. This is a very TLC topic. Less of their embodied life and being more absorbed on screens, like we're doing right now. I keep that pretty limited because I'm like an elder millennial, and I only do this so much because part of it is I feel such extreme guilt that I'm a piece of shit and I should be doing other things. Are you still there? Did you freeze? You're not
No, I'm
reacting to the
here.
words I was saying. Okay. And so I have these conversations with my son because sometimes he desires better friendships or wishes he was better friends with certain people, and he's friends with a bunch of guys at a different Orthodox church in town. But a lot of the ways they interact because they live so far away, even within the same town, is through social media things. But me and my wife limit that. And part of that is when we've just given him full reign, it's shown that he has shown that he doesn't have very great self-control about it. And of course not, because he's still a kid, you know? And so he's learning those things, but we still limit it. But it's a big struggle. I mean, basically, our biggest parenting struggles in the world are food, and part of that's just because of me, and I have all my food convictions, and I think it's a big deal related to health and morality in general. Soil health is a big thing. Eating foods that lend towards soil health and then your own physical health, it's all related. And then screen stuff. And there's a lot of personal details that I could go into, but I don't. But I'm not going to, just because that some of that stuff is private. There's other dynamics in my family too with that you maybe know about, or I'll tell you about off camera. But but this is a struggle that he often has because like I'll say all this stuff to him is like you need to not have friends that are primarily online and that are mediated by technology because I don't think that's good for you. And he's like, but aren't some of your friends, best friends, like online? And I was like, son of a gun. And I don't, and yeah, that's true. And I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it is a problem because like if you were too absorbed in, I don't know, this is a big conversation. But what do you think about that broadly? I could keep talking about it a lot, and it's just
online friends. or children
Yes.
screens.
Yes, it's all of that, but, like, what are the
All of it.
lines? And I feel like this is something that's hard to discern because this is totally new, right? This is, I don't believe in the history of the world as far as we can really know because of this kind of technology, the kinds of things that are possible online, the kinds of relationship like, our relationship that we have would have never been possible 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't think it probably ever in the history of the world. And, like, that's okay, but then again, it's like centers and peripheries and normalizing it. Like, how okay is that? When you're parenting kids, like, us having this relationship is okay, but, like, our relationship should probably never overtake relationships that we need to, like, have shelter and food and water, or
Yeah.
else me and you
Sure.
should move to the same damn town. Like, if it's that big of a
Well,
deal, you
I
know?
mean, my job making videos and animations, like all that's being shared online. Like I have food and money and shelter because of the internet. So it's a little like I don't know, like lots of people have their jobs because of the internet. So it's even
But some of that's gonna go away with AI too.
yeah, maybe. We'll see. I I have opinions about that. But a lot of this stuff is like it used a lot of the rules were um contained by just the logistics of things. Like, so in order for you and I to be friends, I would have to call you on the phone or drive up to Minneapolis,
Mhm.
back in the 90s. But now it's a lot easier to jump on a live stream and just see you and chat. And even if I don't directly chat with you, I see a live stream that you did, and I still get to watch your conversation with someone else. Like I
Right.
get to be like
It's
that.
very
So I'll
convenient.
yeah, and there's a lot of logistics and boundaries that aren't there anymore um, because of the technology. And so, but with that, like any sort of boundaries that you put up, um, feels arbitrary, especially if there's no like social consensus. So, like if in our little, there's some families in the neighborhood, we go to church together, our kids are the same age, they go to school together, you know, when my son has restrictions on his phone, here you have a 2-hour time limit on your phone every day.
Yeah.
And then it's embarrassing for him when the time limit runs out when he's hanging out with his friends
We're
and
dealing with
hi-
similar things.
his friends don't have a time limit
No.
and there's no consensus. So for him, the
Yes.
whole thing is arbitrary.
Yes.
Because
Same.
so and so their time limits and then the logistics are just that dad imposed this
Mhm. And
and
I'm
and
like,
there's
"Go
no
ahead,
like
tell all your friends that I'm just like a controlling asshole
yeah
dad. I don't care."
yeah like imagine what you would have to do to find hardcore porn in the 80s. You had to
I don't have to imagine.
deliberately you'd have to deliberately get in your car, you drive to some place
You have to
that
go through a long walk in the woods.
find a box buried under a tree.
That's right.
No, but like the logistics of it were like unless you were seeking it out, it wasn't gonna like show up. And then even if you had like a desire, like you're at your house and you're like, man, I could really use some hardcore porn right now. Like just the legit, you're like, but I don't want to drive out there. That's like, what if someone sees me? That would be embarrassing and get caught. Like the whole thing, the place is dirty and smells and like, yeah, there you go, under the bridge. Yeah, and then once you know it's under the bridge.
Yeah,
But
and then
then
all of
but
a
then,
sudden,
like
you just see flocks of 12-year-old boys just, like, going under the bridge, and you're like,
yeah,
"What's going
well,
on?"
now this is under the bridge. You like, it's just
Uh,
like, there's a stash right here. And
yeah.
so, like, not only, you know, the the boundaries just sort of helped enforce things naturally. The now, um, Jordan Hall keeps talking about I've been listening to Jordan Hall lately. Like he was talking about how like when he's always talking about this tiny little choice that gets made in your heart or in your soul just before like a cascade of events happen, for good or for bad, like whether you choose good or choose bad or whatever it is, or you compromise, or you have a little courage. And he's saying that moment, it's so tiny that it's barely detectable now.
It's mustard seed.
Well, it's never detectable, and like, but now, like, that's where all choices are made, in this tiny little space, because everything's just sort of like
That's probably part of the analysis paralysis and the speed of the electronic age, is like that little space is hard to find.
yeah, and maybe that's the point of all the distraction and stuff, is to like overwhelm that thing. And because, yeah, and he was even contrasting it with like the choice of like a soldier in war, like to be courageous. And he's like that's when it's turned up to 11, when it's this big thing, when you have this like opportunity to go be courageous, to go rescue your friend, or something needs to happen, and you're the one that all you are aware that if you don't do it, it will not happen. And that if you do it, or if you take the risk, you'll have a chance to save your friend, or whatever it is. And so those, and actually soldiers, like they like those situations, and they actually lament not being in those type of situations after they've been in war for a while, sort of, because when they get back to daily life, in going to the store and picking up kids, and making dinner, and
Yeah.
all the domestic stuff, like there's none of those moments. Those moments don't happen.
Well, and
And
that reminds me of, I think what you're talking about is exactly this. I've been saying this a lot to my family, but it's that great Viktor Frankl quote from Man's Search of Meaning, is when man or a person lacks a source of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. Because it truly is that. Because it's just like, if some human being is utterly consumed with something meaningful, mere expedient pleasure is not. It's not even on the table for them. There's like, I will pursue meaning hard. That's why human beings are alive, is for meaning.
Mhm.
And I think that's the only reason it's
Hey, Alan.
what up,
What's up,
boy?
Jess? Are you going
Hey,
on
hey, hey.
Midwestuary, Jess?
The what?
Midwestuary.
Am I going to Midwestuary?
Yeah.
I think so.
Jess has to go to everything because
I built
he's
them a website.
he does everything.
Um,
I'm hoping
those-
they'll comp my ticket.
Jessica, click the link, come in, let's have a conversation. Throw on a camera. I don't know what you're talking about when you say, what do I mean? What do I mean about what?
the point I wanted to bring on is like, I agree that yeah, but the internet and online things of like, we need to be careful with that. But I think we are also in an age where it's the term internet friend or internet thing is no longer meaningful, because so many things have a relationship to the internet. And that's where the terms break down. You can't just say like, back in the day, it's like, oh, like we call, that's a computer thing. And it's like, well, phones have computers in them. I mean, you're like, almost anything can have a computer in it at this time. So I think, you need wisdom, and you can't just rely on like what's been done before, which is hard because that's what you rely on, the things that have been done before. But it's gonna get, we need a new language, a new relationship, because it's great. I mean, I like the fact that I can have relationships with people who aren't just in a whatever 2-mile vicinity of where I live. But
Everyone within 2 miles of me is boring.
yeah, they all suck and bad.
I have to
But
like
that's
connect so I can talk to Alan.
but so
No.
that's one of the dangers, though, I
No,
think,
I agree.
of this, is that's what I said earlier, is it's kind of like riffing off that Graham Greene line that I love so much, is hate is a lack of imagination, but also boring people are a lack of imagination. Like, how do I foster meaningful valuable, quality conversations with anyone that I talk to, which I think is part of being what St. Paul means in 1 Corinthians 9 when he says, I become all things to all people. Like, are there boring people, or is that just on me? You're just
No,
not doing what I want.
I agree, but I think that, like, we are helping, like, the corner helps me do that. Like, it's not just like, oh, I want someone to, like, have a better understanding of health, so I'll just, like, tie them to the radiator so they can't eat McDonald's. It's like having lack is not always the best teacher, you know, like, oh, like going through pain, sometimes it can be helpful, but it's not always. Like, that's the wisdom thing. It's like we need to extract, like, oh, I'm gonna go, you know, participate in this live stream and that's gonna be helpful. But we also have to have the wisdom to be like, you know what, I'm not gonna go on the live stream because I need to talk to a friend or I need work to get to, you know, like having that
Don't ever say
higher
that.
principle. Yeah, that's true. I mean, now we're gonna get rich off of this.
All right, guys, shut it down.
Yeah.
Always come on the
All right,
live
bye.
stream.
Yeah.
Always.
Good word, Alan. Gotta go.
Yeah. Sorry, Alan, your connection's really spotty. All right, well, he's been blocked and banned. It turns out allegations are coming out against Corner Citizen.
Hey, Alan, can you put those beautiful blues closer to the lens so that I can get more clicks, please?
Yeah. But I think, like, that's the Corner does help us extract the higher principle of, like, how to actually engage. I mean, just because you're, you know, go to any high school and it's just because you're in proximity to people does not mean that you're going to have a good relationship with those people, you know. It's like, you know, so, like, actually drawing out the wisdom, drawing out the relationship. And I think that the Corner, and certainly Estuary, has really helped me learn how to communicate with people. That's an in-person Estuary, but, you know, even these conversations have helped me realize, and, like, how frivolous it is to, like, have this win-lose dynamic in your conversations. But
Right.
I mean, in-person estuaries are fine if I'm not live streaming, I guess. But if you're ever at one and I start live streaming, immediately leave the in-person thing, go in your car, click that link.
Yeah.
Click that link.
Like, subscribe, share. But
Mark, what do you think? I'm gonna go take a potty break.
I missed the last couple minutes. I went in the house, so the conversation probably 10,000 miles away from where I was.
Going.
But yeah, I don't know. It just kind of occurred to me that, you know, I'm driving, so I'm kind of distracted. So that's my excuse for not making sense if I don't. But
okay,
like, I think about in 2004. MySpace was so much fun. It was like a place where you could just post crazy stuff, and, you know, all these young people were on there, your friends, and, you know, you could just goof off, and it was fun. And then a few years into it, it just fell apart. I think it's because Tom, everybody's first friend on MySpace, I think he tried to, like, tinker with it and monetize it, and it started to suck. And I think about, like, Facebook in maybe like 15 years ago was so much fun, even though it still sucked. You know, it's like, even 15 years ago, I was telling myself I wanted to quit Facebook, but it was still fun because, like, you know, you meet up with old friends, your family, you, like, post links and people actually watch them and people actually read what you write. And then, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, it just really ultra started to suck.
Yeah.
And then like Twitter about 7 or 6 years ago was actually really fun. In my opinion, like, you could just hear opinions from all sorts of fringe voices and see like literal arguments between real communists and Nazis live, you know. It's like fun. And then, I don't know, like, lately I don't even really go on there anymore. But, like,
Yeah, it seems like Twitter right now is terrible.
Yeah, it sucks. But I think what it is, I heard of this thing called the engineer's dilemma, to when somebody invents something, like, really effective, then other competitors start trying to come up, and so they try to improve it, and by trying to improve something that's already really good, you actually make it worse. And so, and I feel like there's some truth to that. And I feel like, just think if with the TLC, if these people that want to make rules, if they made rules, if like they were making rules for the TLC, like it would already be destroyed.
Yeah.
Like it would be like, it's like an engineered dilemma, or an engineer's dilemma.
Well, it's also the inverse, not only making rules, but removing barriers. Like sometimes we're like, oh, this is kind of a problem that if we got rid of this, more people would join and be able to do this or that. And then you remove it and it actually makes things worse. I was even reading about this in reference to AI, and it was just a short blurb about some funny things so there was some AI model that was multilingual, and for some reason, all of a sudden the AI model stopped being able to speak Croatian at all. And they went into it and they were trying to figure out like why it wouldn't respond in Croatian anymore. And it turned out that Croatian users would be more likely to downvote conversations or responses. And so the AI just at one point just stopped responding in Croatian altogether because of the downvote process.
Oh,
So they had to go in there and retinker with stuff in order to let it be less sensitive to the Croatian downvotes.
why were they downvoting it?
Who knows? It basically was that like statistically Croatians were more likely to downvote their interactions, and so then it just stopped responding in Croatian, and that seemed to, for the AI, it seemed to fix the problem. Because it was trying to avoid downvotes or whatever the AI, whatever algorithm the AI is trying to satisfy.
So instead of just like seeing past that, it just uses this one little measure and just self-destructs based on that.
Yeah, it could be more than one thing, but that was the main thing that I guess they had drilled it down to. But it's funny because like I think they've realized this, but also this is something we'll discover with AI is all the sort of quirks and features and all the things that we don't think about that add to the experience of things, and that overly messing with stuff doesn't always, we don't know what the results will be, and we think we can engineer things, especially social things. I don't think this has been I don't know. It's the engineers aren't going to be able to manage this. And so what they're doing is they're building out these AIs. They're getting feedback about their inability to like plan and engineer these things, and then they go back in and they engineer more, and it's just like doubling down. And but I think we'll figure out that doubling down doesn't work. Hopefully we'll figure that out.
Because you can't double down on on a human's intelligence, like there's always this chaotic factor with AI. It's like you can just like terminate certain things and just, which is not intelligence.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's actually a paradox. It's like like if you tell the AI it's supposed to make the most toothpicks or whatever. I forget what the paradox is called, or
Paperclips.
Paperclips. Yeah, optimize for paperclips, and then it destroys the world in its pursuit of optimization for paperclips. And yeah.
It's when you were talking, Jess, about all these things, it made me, essentially what you're talking about is why I'm a non-interventionist. Like, this is what I talk about broadly with everything.
Let it be. Let it be.
No, imagine.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Imagine there's no heaven.
But because of that very reason is I think human beings in their I would probably call it like ego and like narratival abstractions have these ideas of how the world's supposed to be, and then they technologically intervene to, and this is where I would say this is the difference between creation and manufacturing, to manufacture their utopia, and they end up creating hell. That's the road to hell, is paved with good intentions by this technological interventionism so that we can create our utopias. Because the problem is there's so many unintended side effects to what your intervention will create that you can't predict and foresee because you don't know enough. And so, and I think that's largely why you shouldn't be intervening that much. And like, that's been a hard lesson. I think that's true of parenting, which isn't my natural what's the word? My natural instinct. I want to intervene a lot. And what is the wisdom of doing that? You know, like but like technology, for example, with kids, to bring it back to that, is something like, this is what I often say to my son. I'm just like, I'm the one who's paying for your cell phone. You know, like I gave you that. Like the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of me. You know, and it's just like, I can take you. I brought you into this world. I can take you out. No, I'm just kidding. But with the phone, I'm just like, I don't have to give you the rope to hang yourself. I don't have to do that. And whatever, all your friends are doing it, and I'm just like, if all your friends jumped off a cliff, would you jump off? And so it's not. So I'm trying. Listen, I'm trying to encourage myself that that's not interventionism when I take the phone away. I'm like, it was interventionism to give him the phone. I'm just discerning that it's maybe not a wise thing. And so, yeah. And
yeah, but
like,
this is what I mean by like the social consensus, because like within the family construct, it may make sense to like take away the phone, but then within the larger context of the friend groups and the whatever, like it just is, it's cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah.
You know,
and
and
yeah,
then
exactly.
and what you know, without social consensus, you kind of have this like parallelization where you're forcing people to either be, well, to either super liberal and just allowing whatever the social consensus is, or you have to all of a sudden put your foot down and become a conservative.
But is that, but like, even that,
it,
if you're being super liberal to follow the consensus, that's not liberal, that's conservative.
well, we're in, but that's how people mean it now, and that's how
Yeah.
the conservatives act and liberals act. Liberals are managing the social consensus machine, and conservatives were like, whoa, what's happening? This is dizzy. And then now the conservatives are like, you know, wanting to enforce boundaries and rules. And but I mean, all this is mixed up, because like you hear it's so funny because you listen to liberal people, like especially like very liberal, very progressive people, talk long enough, and they'll talk about how they've had to put up boundaries against certain people and protect themselves against certain types of people in their personal life. And like, what are you talking about? Like, they're like, oh, like I had to like cut my grandfather out of my life because of his voting for Trump or whatever. I'm like, oh, you're putting up boundaries and borders and enforcing them, and okay, all right.
So quick administrative thing. So Gritch, something like that, we had in the background, and I didn't add them because I didn't see a camera. And part of that is because, listen, if you want to come on screen, I don't necessarily need you to have a camera, but I need to at least see a camera off. Because like Mark's on screen, and he doesn't have a camera, but I know Mark, and he doesn't want to show his face for reasons. And so that's all fine. So if you want to come on the stream and you don't want to have a camera, that's fine, but I need to somehow vet you not publicly behind screen, because we've had people come on screen before and do lewd things. There's been trolls and naughty people on camera. Like, I don't want somebody to come on camera and like show naughty things. Okay, is that you now? You want to be on screen with the camera, Alom? You're good? I'm gonna add you.
this
Give me
is
a
a
thumbs up.
this is a wholesome Christian program.
Yeah, it is very much so. And then this Foxman comment. So that was just admin stuff. So come back, please. I'll add you, but you don't have to have your camera on if you don't want to. I understand that reservation, but liberal to what, conservative to what? These are arbitrary terms. I wouldn't say they're arbitrary. They're relative. Like everything, they're
Yeah, it's
relative.
relative.
And so like power is relative. Okay, I see you. You don't have to have your camera. I'll add you. If you want to take it off. Are you okay? Give me a thumbs up if you want me just to add you, or you can remove your camera if you want. All right, here we go.
You know, I'll say something real fast before the new guy, which is
Yep.
Oh,
And
which
then you went
is,
silent.
oh my gosh, the cliffhanger. The cliffhanger.
Well, I'm excited. So I don't know how to say this. Alum, Gritchy, welcome, Alum. I've seen you around in comments a lot. Breaking the fourth wall. Is this your first fourth wall break?
Pretty much. It's just the reason why I joined is is my audio
hear
okay
you.
first?
We
Yeah,
hear
okay.
you.
I'm so terrible with the technical. I should ask first. But I'm joining because y'all are talking about the cell phones and technology, and that is currently a major it's actually what you're talking about, what we were talking about, right? Meaning making. Well, it's actually been confusion. So this began, for the most part, when Jonathan Haidt wrote his book, The Anxious Generation. You guys familiar with that?
Yep.
Yeah, and in his book, he made that claim that take away cell phones, but he has admitted since publishing it, mostly just on his blog, that he was wrong, right? Because studies show that kids just pine away, thinking about what they're going to post, thinking about, I can give examples on it. And I'll give you a proof why he's realized this has failed. When he initially launched the book, he was giving away those lock boxes for cell phones, one to the family, and then he'd give 20 to the school. He's stopped doing that. And what he's now doing is what's called free range kids. And so what he's realized is you have to empower your kids to actually have what you said, discernment. And what I recommend is put educational apps on your children's cell phones, have them develop a discernment between wasted time and quality time and actually valuing it, if that makes sense. I just hate when people are saying we got to end the technology. That's what you love, McLuhan, right?
Yeah.
So do I. And like, what are we going to do? Get rid of light bulbs? Because that's a medium of information as well, the technology. So that's the thing that's driving me the most nuts right now is people are arguing, this tech's bad. And, we need a meta-modern approach to see what old still works and what new might guide. But that requires the discernment, active engagement, right?
Yeah,
That's my take.
I think it actually requires time. And one of the things
Yes.
is that we never have enough time to allow things to sort of play out. So like if you go in and you dam a river, it's going to be like a giant disruption to the local ecosystem. And, you have a reservoir now that wasn't there. And, fish can't spawn, go upstream and spawn and all this stuff. And so there's this major disruption. But if you leave the dam there long enough, everything in nature adjusts. There's some stuff you got to do. You got to build fish ladders so fish are able to get upstream past the dam. Some stuff like that. But overall, like nature will, the world will reach an equilibrium around that disruption. But it takes time. And with a big enough disruption, there, you need even longer time for it to equalize. And so like we just introduced cell phones into the world just after we introduced the internet into the world, and we didn't even have enough time to really get used to it. And then now we're introducing AI. Like it's too many disruptions in a row. And like, what do? You just say, okay, let's stop here and let everything sit for 100 years and we'll just see how this sort of plays out. I think, I don't know.
Well, and I don't think you can. I mean, that's kind of like the race to the bottom or nuclear disarmament or whatever. Like we're not gonna stop. Like people aren't gonna stop building AI. But I don't know. And I agree with you, but then it's the wisdom of, because all this is related to what I was talking about before with boundaries and hospitalities and inside and outside and semi-permeable walls. And how do you allow that as the as the parent or as the ruler of the city or whatever, how do you apply your wisdom and your will and your mind to a proper flow of all that stuff, because everything is a relationship and fluid. And if you allow it too quickly, that could be bad. So like even with Haidt says, well, social media, like you can't keep that from your kids forever. You absolutely can't, but you cannot give it to them until they're 16. I mean, I don't know what you think about that all, because it's interesting to me that you come in here. I've seen a lot of your comments. You're obviously a smart guy, wise, smart. I don't see, that's a tell too. Intelligence isn't a virtue. You seem to be a wise person. And so, and Haidt, I love Haidt. And so like, if he's changing his mind on some of this stuff and seeing things differently, I want to hear more about that.
Well, can I give you a more recent example? Are you familiar with Jonathan McWhorter? He's very famous.
No.
I know him because he's a linguist. He's an expert in Creole.
Oh, John McWhorter. Yes.
He wrote a book called Woke Religion. That's how I actually got excited originally. And he failed utterly because he doesn't have faith. And he opened his book by saying, well, we all know religion is stupid, which he fails, because if he's a linguist, he should know that religion is the path you follow with devotion and commitment, right? So that's why I thought he was going to show woke as a more recent example of where we're failing. Okay, it's engagement. For years, teachers used to think that kids learn either visually or auditorily. That was invented by a New Zealand teacher just out of the blue. What we found out, what really gets people to be learn well, is engagement. So the example I give is Jonathan McWhorter and Glenn Laurie were doing a seminar on how do we get people to value education. Okay, and I'll tell you, there's a separate issue about the funding, but what I'm going to talk about is what they've changed as teachers. So I'm playing off of Jess. He said, we're too busy nowadays. And Jonathan McWhorter, he agrees with you, and I don't, but I'm the most disagreeable person on the planet, I think. He's wrong, because he said that we are too busy. We don't have enough time. So he says he can't give the same assignments to kids anymore. But I run into kids regularly who have been taught in the last 20 years, didn't even read the books, you know? So Jonathan McWhorter said, well, we used to assign Plato's Republic, right, to everyone. And he says, well, I can't do that anymore because they don't have time. So what he said is, now what we do is we deeply engage with 50 pages of the dialogue. But here's the issue, is these kids still aren't deeply engaging with that dialogue, even the 50 pages. So it's not, and here's my solution to everyone. Our problem is, Marianne Wolf, one of the foremost researchers in reading, said that we're natural storytellers and natural listeners. This is why podcasts and this discussion is why it's so relevant and why Plato's dialogues still resonate today. But we have to learn how to read. So what I see as the failure, the disconnect, is we have our kids, we read to them up to a point, then we go, nope, all on you now, bruv. And a modern researcher said the problem is these slow learners grow into people who don't like to read. So if you're wondering, my hack, because I was a banker for years, I didn't have time. Audiobooks, right? That's how I have been able to read thousands and thousands of books. I read one book a day because of audiobooks. Because here's the thing. Audible shows that people aren't using audiobooks. Why? Because science has shown that people listen exponentially faster than they can read. Yet Audible has shown that less than 2%, it might be higher, but less than 2%, it was 1.2%, listen to any audiobook higher than 1 time speed. And technically, almost every audiobook is shipped at slower than the person read it. Like, for example, I read Henry Winkler's autobiography recently. You know how fast he talks, probably as fast as I do, but he speaks like this when you first set up the book and start listening to it. And there's this cognitive dissonance. Right? You have to have it a certain speed or you won't pay attention, not too fast. You know what I mean? So long story short, science is so slow. Jung said it takes 20 years for this shit to trickle down. We're seeing that we're failing our kids. We should be giving them audiobooks, ebooks, and physical books. That's the way forward for your kids. And then the same thing, change their relationship with tech, right? So that's what I found.
Yeah, that's super interesting. The one quick thought I had, and then I want to see Gritchy, if you want to talk, Gritch, if you want to tell me how to pronounce your name, you can come in whatever time. Luke, good to see you. But the one thought I had when you were saying that is it makes me think of and I didn't bring it up yet in here, but it's related to relational ontology, is morphic resonance. I mean, that's what you're talking about. Is it slow? Science is slow. All this stuff is slow. Well, that's because as new things, I always use Rupert Sheldrake's illustration of crystals. Like the first time that you form a new crystalline structure, it really resists coming into formation. It's hard. It's slow. It's difficult. But then as you get that memory of that crystal, as there's a memory in time, it becomes faster and faster and faster. And I think that's how. So anything that's novel is going to be necessarily slow, and it should be slow. That's where probably with the mind, you should be conservative with slow, but then you can't stay there.
Yep. That's how learning works, believe it or not. I make this joke, and it's a play on Shakespeare. And so we don't teach our kids algebra so that they'll all be algebraists when they grow up. It's what Sherlock Holmes said. It's to increase the minor folds in the brain. So when you conquer something difficult to learn, the next difficult thing that you go to conquer becomes easier. It becomes easier and easier. And we used to think it was because, it's accomplished. It's not. We're developing the complex shit of the brain. You know what I mean?
Neural pathways. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that sort of. Yeah. But that's exactly the thing. It's about engagement, because you know what happens if you're engaged. Not only do you get into that flow state, y'all have been talking about this the last few days, noise. You can't drown out noise. I was one of those students that I could hear the fan, the pencil scraping on the paper. It's flow. So you only block out the noise when you're in that flow. But what else? When you're engaged, we've seen this. They studied two groups of people. They let one group try and fail to memorize a passage, and the other group was allowed to take all the time they needed to try to memorize it. Well, the ones that tried and failed over and over again kept the most of that information long term. So it's when you're struggling, when you're engaged, that's when you integrate the knowledge truly.
Yeah.
And when it lasts,
That's really good.
Yeah.
That reminds me of what you just said. It reminds me a ton. I wish I just had an automatic clip of Karen Wong from the Meaning Code at Northwestuary. She gave the example of, because she's this artist, right? And she's taken art classes, and she said one was on like throwing clay pots and forming pots. And she said she had an instructor who said, okay, I'm going to split up the class into two people. One group of people is like, you make the perfect pot. And the other one's going to be great on how many pots you throw. Just like however many you can do, that's your grade. And she said, guess which one made the better pot? It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yep. Well, actually, we're seeing that in the film industry now. Actually, it was usually, I thought the film, what's his name? Smith. He's famous right now because he's doing interviews online on the woke crowd. But he did a video. He was on Joe Rogan, and he was talking about the Smith guy. He's a teacher. He was just on Joe Rogan a little while ago, but he was talking about Christopher Nolan's brilliance in filmmaking. But I think the big takeaway from that interview is, and they didn't mention it, is they've tried to simplify narrative, books, films into an algorithm, into a formula. And what do you rob of that? You rob the humanity, just like AI. Right, the creative, what I would call gravitas and veritas, right? Yeah. And that's what we're seeing in our films. It doesn't have the resonance because it doesn't have the passio, right? The old Greek passio, the passion that consumes you wholly, right? Like Hemingway said, write the book that has to be written, that you must write, not that you want to write. You get what I mean? I digress.
No, good stuff, man.
I'm chattier than you, Luke. Trust me,
dude. You have some. You have some like. You could do some great. You could rival my intros with your own monologues. Let's see it.
Yeah,
Luke, what's up, buddy? Good to see you.
Let me unmute. Hey.
Tell us about the twins and the farm and the whatever else.
Twins are good. The oldest just turned 4. And the babies are 10 months old, so they'll be turning 1 in June. But it's great. Beautiful spring here in Arkansas, man. We were harvesting lettuce and radishes this morning with the big boys.
Nice.
Yeah, super great. Yeah.
See, that's also the thing is like, I bet the way that you're living, I would almost guess that your kids will not have nearly the problem with technology and cell phones that most people do.
Yeah, we'll see. We did an experiment. It was after we had a few weeks of snow, and so the boys were watching a lot of TV, and we just got tired of TV. So we told the boys the TV was broken, that it was at the shop, at the repair shop. We just took it off the wall and we never put it back. Like we've gone without a TV for, we're on like 3 months, man. And every now and then they'll be like, is the TV still at the shop? We're like, yeah, it's taken them a really long time.
That's hilarious.
So,
Yeah.
we'll see about the phones. We definitely want to delay as long as possible. But I agree. I think we've definitely noticed with the boys that not having a screen in the house, they stop asking about it. And then they're just way more interested in doing like puzzles or Satchel, one of the 4-year-olds, he's been loving art, painting and drawing. And then Benny loves sports, so he'll play with balls. And anyway, it's really helped their attention, like being able to focus on, physical things, not having that screen that is,
That's the future.
drawing their attention.
Future of education, by the way, is they found that the students that spent most of their careers in the tablet and not writing, right? Like not actually using a pen. Oh, this background sucks. Again, failure, right? And what we've seen is if you take magic mushrooms as example, that's when you will see that the computer screen is fake and we're suspending. It's almost like the suspension of the Unreal. Remember you talked about that before? But so just as a warning, here's the real truth. If you delay your children's introduction to this technology, especially when all the other kids are, if like me, I grew up in Northern Ontario on a farm. So my friends actually were much more susceptible to drugs, to addiction, to television, to technology. It's because they hadn't had the ability. There's a quote that I love that says, be easy on young men because they haven't had the experience in suffering that we have. And it's the same idea, right? That kids that have had the years to be able to discern the difference between a tool and something that turns you into a tool. So I'd highly recommend that you start using your kids. And what I recommend you do is offline, install some educational software on the phone so that they will never see it as doom scrolling device, But
yeah. So a quick, I love that you're a contrarian. I love that you're pushing back. I don't actually like, believe it or not, I don't like communities of groupthink. But one of my things where I'd push back a little bit is I know of, and this is something that Height's talked about too. So you've probably heard some of these aspects, but like
he's got his other book as well, right? Coddling of the American Mind.
Yes, but like suicide or like iGen and suicidality, especially in young girls. And like I know because I know people who work in this area, like a lot of pediatric ER rooms are becoming completely overwhelmed with suicidal young girls. Like it's like it really is unbelievable.
60% of young girls under 30 today have been diagnosed with some sort of mental illness. It's a crisis. But if I could blow your mind, it's a crisis of health, not mental health. It's likely maybe even a mitochondrial issue, but just plain and simple. From a philosophical stance, because I'm not a medical doctor, it's an identity crisis. We're all living in an identity crisis. So I recommend a great book by Matthias Desmond. It's called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And he's building upon Hannah Arendt's magnum opus about totalitarianism. But my favorite quote has nothing to do with totalitarianism. Unless So he said, identity are the stories that other people tell that you live. Mythos, are the stories that you tell and you live. And that's what's happening today, right? Nietzsche himself was half Polish, half German. He hated that whenever he ran into someone, they thought he was German or thought he was Polish. But you know what he really is? It's the beauty of the Canadian identity that they pretend doesn't exist anymore in the American identity. Why? Because he was Polish and German, but not wholly so. It's called the gestalt of self. He wasn't any one part of who he was, where he's from or what he spoke. McLuhan talked about this. So did Northrop Frye. We're a complex of all of it. And so what's happening in this day and age is people don't want to admit that. And they want to, I call it the crisis of prophilicity. And that goes back to Baudrillard as well. We're all our online profiles. That's it, right? We're not our real self, not even in real life. Like I equate it back to, I used to call it the Xbox Live effect. Back when this first started. So the way I equated this is when we used to play video games when I was young, we used to play against real people, right? Either a LAN party or it was your buddy across town. But then when Xbox Live came out, you were playing against an avatar, right? A fake individual, an archetype, a persona. And I think that after 20 years has carried into, again, a crisis of prophilicity, where the only way that we can interact authentically with ourselves and each other is to know ourselves authentically. And when we're lost and other people are lost, and final quote, McLuhan predicted this. He said, there'll come a time when multiple generations will struggle to understand each other's grammar. And I'll go one step further. Each generation now is struggling to understand their own grammar. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Millennials, Gen Z, they don't understand each other. So how can we understand each other across generation gaps? And that's what I think is this crisis of identity, if you understand what I mean. The suicidal ideation, because people, like Frankel said, actually, I think you missed my comment. Frankel's quote was about drunkenness and debauchery. And I think that relates to 1 Timothy 8-11, where it talks about anything that goes against sound doctrine, right? So if you are doing something that is fantasy or harms other people or just denies the truth of your own soul, then that denatures yourself. And I think that's why we've ended up in this crisis of identity. You know, my take.
Yeah. Luke, what did you mean by this?
I'm sorry. I feel like I just drank out of a freaking fire hydrant. Al, you're just.
There's a lot there.
I can't.
I'm sorry.
Man,
I'm
a
like
slow
Luke,
processor, dude.
I'm sorry. Yeah. You know what I recommend is people record me and then slow me down.
I gotta slow you down, man.
Yeah.
I gotta listen to you on 0.5.
That is, there's a lot. I agree. You are like that.
I was following you out.
No,
I'm
a
tracking.
good match for Luke though. But no, I think just tying it back into relational ontology, and for some reason I've been like really interested in learning more about Whitehead, which I haven't read any Whitehead, but been listening to a lot of commentary on Alfred North Whitehead, especially from Footnotes to Plato. Matt Segal, he has some really good content on Whitehead. But the relational aspect, I think you're totally right. And the prophilicity, I think that move from, what are those modes of identity? But it's like sincerity,
Authenticity,
then prophilicity. But all these, what it is, it's more of a solipsistic focus on the self, and a self that's in isolation from context. So that's exactly what I mean, is that I think what prophilicity has done, and I think this is being done to, let's say, younger millennials and Gen Z. I feel like I've been blaming them less and less. I feel like it's more their symptoms. The symptomology is a symptom of the societal sickness and their context. But what's being done is that
with the sickness.
But Gen Z, I mean, you're being asked to look into yourself and create your profile, which it's self-referential. It doesn't really see the relational ontology of the self. I mean, maybe you can say, like, it's pretty common in like Christian Instagram to be like, Luke Freeman, follower of Christ, husband, father, farmer, whatever. And so I think that's an attempt to draw those, those relational connections, but the profile itself, just the way it exists, it's an isolation of those connections. Like, do you see what I mean? And so I think it forces someone to see themselves isolated, as more like an object, more like object ontology instead of relational ontology. And so then I think when I see like these people trying to solve the identity crisis, it is seeing oneself like in a more communal context, which on the left, I think that takes the form of, I guess it's honestly taking the form on both left and right in identity politics to some degree. And what is your identity? It could be, a grievance group, or it could be an ethnicity.
Even the atheists, right? That they identified themselves.
It's an ideology.
As a non-belief.
Yes. And so I think that's where like that post-liberal, because I think like the hyper liberal move is just to kind of, you're just doubling down on that kind of object-oriented identity. I think that's what liberalism does, as it tries to just put all these individuals together and each person gets a vote and we decide what we're going to do. And that post-liberal move is more community focused, more relational. And it just is taking a lot of different forms, you know, both in like, I mean, you could see it in the move towards traditional religions, move towards like more of a identitarianism. It could be like a white identitarianism, or, you know, it can be LGBT, it can be, you know, black. I mean, you just see it all over the place.
Can I just boil it down pretty simply? I highly recommend Martin Buber's book called I and Thou. He's a Jewish man, well-educated, but the reason why I recommend it, it is the heart of Vedanta, of Hinduism, of Buddhism. All of it is I and Thou. Tatvamasi in Sanskrit, the sixth line of one of the original Upanishads in Isha Upanishad, the sixth line says, seeing the self in others and seeing the other in oneself is the end of hurt or the end of suffering, depending on how you want to register that. So what's failing here, and this is Martin Buber's entire thesis, is the problem isn't the interaction, it's the type of interaction. So Martin Buber says it can either be an inauthentic interaction, so you're not pretending, like the gentleman that said if you don't have social media, you don't have a profile. That's ridiculous, right? You go out, you dress up, you play a character. We're always playing a character. So the issue is, do you know who you truly are? And the only way you can know who you truly are is by engaging with other authentic individuals. So Martin Buber, when he wrote his book, he was just saying that if you treat someone as less than, right? Like if you go, well, I'm a liberal and you're a right winger, so you're less than me, you denature your humanity. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about this 100 years before him, that when you're treated as less than human, it's called double consciousness. It breaks you and it breaks the other person, right? So what I'm getting at here is Martin Buber, again, didn't predict how bad it would get. So not only are we dehumanizing other people, we're actually not even knowing ourselves. We don't even know our true selves. So all of our interaction is inauthentic. And we're, as Nietzsche said in his later workbooks, we are so far gone, we may have to back translate ourselves to find out what our true nature is, because we have forgotten it and lost it so wholly. You get what I mean?
Yeah, in the cycle on, like, who is it? It's like Zizek and Lacan, I think, but they're always, their whole thing is, the way I understand it is, you try to get the view of the other, rather so when, and then it's also the view of God. So like, it's not important like what you believe about God, it's what you think God believes about you. And that is what you live into, is not what you believe about God, it's what you think God already believes about you. And so a lot of like what I see like beneficially happening in Christianity, and even personally for me, was understanding how God sees me. It's almost irrelevant how of what I think, what my view of God is. Like it is relevant because I have to voice those things. Sometimes they build up and I can't. So you voice those things, but then God gets to answer with his own viewpoint of who he thinks I am, or who, and that's what's powerful. And it's even just that way in personal relationships. Like I'll have a view of how I think my wife is looking at me, but and I think I just know that she's whatever, she's unhappy or whatever. And then all of a sudden, I have a conversation with her. She gets her, I say what I think. You're unhappy. She says, she's like, I'm just frustrated, or not even frustrated. She's experiencing something else. She's experiencing disappointment of something else.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay. And then I was listening to something recently, and regularly psychologists will, well, I think the person was, I can't remember the context. Sorry. But anyway, they were talking about talking to patients in a psychological, patient psychologist setting. And they were talking about how someone always interpreted, what was it? It was similar to just what the example I used. Like someone will be disappointed, but you always interpret that as anger. And it's just a constant throughout your life. You're like, everyone's angry, everyone's angry, everyone's
Yeah,
always
that's
angry.
young, which
Yeah,
you, just like in yourself, you'll see in others.
Yeah, and it's not until the other gets to tell you how they see you that you actually can like get over that sort of perception. And it's
Negativity
really,
bias.
yeah, for me, it's all about perception. It has little to do with propositions, although propositions are useful in as far as they can help you perceive or help you understand someone else's perception. And yeah,
I like that. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's actually, I'm not a big fan of Vervaeke for the most part, but honestly, I think his perspectival knowing, perspectival relational, like it goes back to Nishitani and even Jung, right? Nishitani used this Japanese word called basho, and he used it very specifically because basho in Japanese means it's two characters. And it's interesting, but the two characters going way back means the warrior ready for battle and in the place of battle. So right place, right time, right? Basho. And that's what he was saying. Like so many people are thinking about what they're going to say or thinking about the bills they're going to pay when this is the Hindu idea that to be aware, to be present. So you can never know what the other person's thinking, but if you're not fully engaged with that person and you don't think about your history with them and their preferences, then you will miss a lot of the context. You get what I mean? And I again argue the mistake today is no one is authentically engaging. The example I give is in Sanskrit, everyone now says namaste. Well, technically that just means, oh, look, I put my hands together. That's all that means. Namaskar means I see your soul, right? My soul sees your soul. And it's just a flattening to make it simple for everyone. But even the Indians now say namaste, right? Unless it's like some of my teachers who are actually, knowledgeable.
What are you supposed to say? What's the one that says
You're
my
supposed
soul?
to say namaskar. If they're from the south, you would say namaskar, namaskar. And if you're from the north, it'd be namaskaram. It's just a
because I love that. Like my soul sees your soul. Because I completely agree with you. That's what the thing is. Like you won't understanding someone truly. Like William said this earlier. Because one of my favorite verses in the Bible is knowing as you are known. That 1 Corinthians 8 thing. That's when the relation is primary. It's when you're in the flow with the other person. When you see them. You maybe can't articulate that. It's maybe not even self-aware, but you are just fully engrossed in the flow of being absorbed. And that's the I thou.
The two
when you're fully absorbed.
Yeah, when the two become one, right?
Yes.
That's the gestalt of being.
Yes.
And that's the idea. No one ever understands. It's a two-way street. The gestalt of being means that you're made up of a million different little parts. But if it wasn't for the million other parts in the universe, you wouldn't be that. And I love this because Sarva Priyananda, he's the head of Vedanta in New York. He just actually did an entire hour-and-a-half long discussion about line 6 of the Isha Upanishad, my favorite line. And that's exactly what he was saying. If you were to string a million zeros in line, and this is from Swami Vivekananda, by the way, the guy that came to America in 1893 to give speeches. If you string a million zeros together, it's worthless, valueless. But if you put the 1 in front of a 0, that's a 10. And in front of 100 zeros, you get what I mean? So this is this idea that when we go around as a hollow being, a non-player character, Nietzsche's herd beast, right? Not engaging authentically with our world, we're worthless. We're nothing. But when we, no matter what you want to call the greater good, even Bishop Barron invoked the Gnostic greater good. It doesn't matter what you believe in, as long as you believe in something greater than yourself. Now you've put a 1 in front of you, and now you have value. Now you have value. You get what I mean? That was my favorite way of explaining this, right? God as the 1. Get it? Because it's a play on wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
But a 0 is worthless until you put the 1 in front, right? But if you put yourself ahead of the 1, right? It kind of negates it. Anyway, I just loved how he explained that. I guess I didn't explain it as well as he did.
So what do you, this is me. I would love to hear how you respond to this, because this is a question that I have. I want to know your thoughts on it. Like, what do you, because this is a very Peter Rollins thing. I don't know if you've ever followed Peter Rollins, but like, what do you think is,
Look him up, though.
what is, this is a question I have that I talk with my friends Cal all the time, is like, what do you think is primary, unity or contradiction?
Well, we talked about this earlier, and I actually it was so funny. I was actually talking with some friends in Discord, and there was a young lady who came in who was from India. And it's funny because 90% of Indians have completely turned their back on their culture, but there is a small portion of them that will yell at you if you pretend like you know anything about their culture. And so she came in when we were talking about dualism and non-dualism. And I just made a comment that I said the interesting part of a non-dualistic tradition is they will eventually explain to you that there is no such thing as non-dualism, right?
Mhm.
Everything is this contradiction of dualism and non-dualism.
Mhm.
So this is why I point to koinonia. It's that Greek word from the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Koinonia,
Tell us
I
what.
translate it as communion,
Yeah.
the metaphysical communion, not the physical communion. And koinonia is this idea that you're connected to each other, man to man, and I mean man and woman, but also to God, God and man, and to each other. And that's that Holy Spirit idea. It's like this, like Emerson's circles, right? Circles upon circles, right? So we're never an individual. We're just like circles that are coming together or pulling apart, but we're always connected. Does that make sense? Right. So there is no
There's a great
individual.
new There's a great new lyric from Bon Iver's new album, which he ripped off from me. There are things behind things behind things, and there are rings within rings within rings.
I love that. Yeah. Well, that's my joke on the turtle. What is it? Turtles all the way down. It's a famous philosophical idea.
Yeah.
And that's what, believe it or not, and this is why I make it full circle, because Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, famous American, wrote his essays, which influenced Friedrich Nietzsche, right? Nietzsche walked around with Emerson's essays. So his Oversoul from Emerson is Nietzsche's Übermensch. These circles is this idea that, think of it like, what is that common expression? Like the butterfly, what do you call that? The ripples, right?
Butterfly effect?
Well, this idea that by acting consciously in the universe, you are actively engaging in the universe and transforming the universe, even if you're not directly involved with what's being transformed.
Jess has a great video on that. It's a really good one.
I'll have to take a look at that. Well, that was actually a rabbi this morning. Yeah.
Also, I want to just ask you this. Do you want to out yourself? What is your self-identity?
I couldn't
rings
tell you,
within rings within rings.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not something that could be categorized, right? Dude, I'll tell you my story real quick. My father,
random.
My father is Roman Catholic. My mother was charismatic Baptist, and they became Anglican. But in Canada, don't misunderstand. Canada, high Anglican in Canada is very close to Catholic, right? But I had a love for football when I was a kid, and when my mom threatened to send me to a Catholic school, I spent my formative teenage years learning about religions around the world. And I found out very quickly I knew more about them than most of the people, right? So long story short, I do consider myself a Christian in the sense that I believe in the teachings of Christ and his ministry and all that jazz. I read the Bible, right? Very much so. My favorite study Bible is a Catholic study Bible, if that's weird.
Man. Look out.
No.
MacArthur study Bible?
No, it's not. It's it. But I also have a new international version of the Ryrie. That one's a great example, right? So, but I also, spend 9 months of the year studying Hindu philosophy and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm a bit of a quandary.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit of a
evangelical.
Yeah, well, yes, I guess, but I don't know what that term means. But I mean, I'm all over the map.
No one does.
But let's be honest. Like, if you believe in God, then I personally think, like Swami Vivekananda said, how can you deny anyone else if they are a true believer in God? You get what I mean? And that's probably where I come from, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, that's probably why I relate to so many of your comments, and I relate to you. See, like, because then I have a question, because I relate to all of that. I think it's true, but yet I don't believe, for myself at least, I don't believe in kind of a non-initiated, non-practiced, non-committed, like generalist perennialism. Because I don't think you can. You can't. It's kind of the idea of fairy. Like when I've talked about fairy and infundibularity, is like the innermost door is fairy, but you learn that through an initiation in some particular practice. So, like, do you have a particular religious practice?
I do, but it probably would upset you. My religious practice again is universal, right? So I used to give tours in a Buddhist temple and museum, and I used to practice there, but I wasn't their version of Buddhism. I also go to a Roman Catholic church just up the street from me, named after Sir Thomas More, by the example, which is kind of funny, right? A fellow heretic. But like, I'll give you an example. The reason why I don't affiliate, I'm like Karen Armstrong, someone who I highly recommend you guys need to read, right? Especially her book about the art of scripture, our lost appreciation for the art of scripture, Karen Armstrong. And the reason why I mention her is she joined the Catholic Church, became a nun before Vatican II. Then she left the church after the 60s. So she saw before, she saw how it changed. But here's my real takeaway. I went over Lent. I went to our Roman Catholic Church a couple times, and I almost experienced what the church is meant to do, almost one of these days. So I've experienced it in the Buddhist temple as well, but they fail as well. So they'll all get together chanting mantra. And this was a Chan style temple. So they'll walk around doing a walking meditation, and they'll chant the compassion Dharani, the mantra of compassion. But when you ask them, the majority of them don't know what it says. They don't actually know what they're chanting, but they're just chanting the same sound. And that same thing happened to me at the Catholic Church. I missed the fact that they used to have the Latin liturgy. Why? Because that allows you to get out of yourself. And so I was sitting there one day, and yes, a lot of people are making scuttlebutt, but almost everyone got in unison, almost in perfect unison. And I felt that experience that I felt when I was 14. A minimization of the self, of ego, right? Do you get what I mean? And I think that's why we're meant to come together in church, you know, wherever it is. And I think the reason why so many people are becoming more spiritual, but not affiliated, is because you go to the church. And I went to the United Church a few weeks ago. They didn't mention God for the first half hour. They talked about Black Lives Matter, right? The month for Black Lives Matters, but they never mentioned that we had a historic slave-founded church here in town. They were just talking about American history, and then they were talking about money. So my point is, people come to church for community. None of them have community. None of them have the meaning, or more importantly, you go in there and you should feel like you're part of something greater than yourself. And I think that's what's missing, and why so many people are moving to Orthodox. I don't know if you guys agree, but I think it's because they take the ritual more seriously. And it's the partition. It's what St. John of the Cross said. He said, these things are not understood when sought, but only understood when practiced and found. And that's what I'm finding. People are not engaging. So I am a heretic because I engage fully in many different denominations, different religions. But I think the real problem is most people who identify with one particular denomination don't engage fully or deeply with their own. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I know what the church is. I know what the church is meant to do, Luke, because it's been around since the dawn of time. Arguably, if you want to be secular about it, a church, a religion, is meant to keep the society together for longer, right? And so, if we're still, what Nietzsche said, God is dead because we stopped believing in Him. That's literally what we're living here today, right? We got these church buildings that no one goes to, that they're only being used one day a week, and yet no one stops and goes, "Wow." It's not community. You get what I mean? Because, well, I could digress on that. That's.
I think that comment from me was a little tongue in cheek.
No, it's perfect.
You as a self-professed heretic saying,
but no, I get called a heretic. Even my mother called me a heretic.
I think I might be a little more skeptical of my own ability to know what something above me is for.
Not for.
I
trust that.
I agree with you that participation is key. Koinonia is key. I find that very meaningful. I agree with you that is missing. That is why people are looking for more participatory forms of worship.
Gravitas.
But I just have to ask you. I mean, I just don't think any of us can say what the church is for in a way in which
we're talking
have
Christian,
a view
right?
from above it. I mean, if
okay,
the church is the
I'll
body
just be
of Christ,
simple for you. I know, but forget that shit. That's not it. So
Christ knows what his will is. I mean, we have intimations, right? I'm a little more how should I say, skeptical of my ability to see the church from a God's eye view. I think that's where
That's not what we're asking you. Plain and simple, you're a Christian then, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, church, what is the source of that word? Church.
Ecclesia.
Ecclesia. And ecclesia means what?
It's a gathering.
Community.
A
Communitas.
community, yeah.
Communitas. So church is communitas, community. So when you are skeptical, it's because you've probably never experienced true community in your church. You get what I mean? Because
I don't think you understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, how do you know the full will of God? How do you know God's
I didn't
purpose?
say that. Never said that. I just
Okay,
plain and simple said people aren't coming to church anymore because they're not getting the basics. Like, forget about communion with God. If you go there and it's a bunch of little cliques coming and going, and that's not that connection, right? With other people, it's not that connection. What I mean is, the only way you can feel that there's something more than yourself, get over what Luke said, that so many of us put the one behind the zero, instead of the one in front of the zero, right? We put ourselves ahead of God. And the reason why we do that is because you've never experienced that dissolution of self. Like, have you ever gone to church and you're sitting there and everyone's chanting together and you're like, holy shit, I just feel like I'm part of something greater than myself. Have you ever had that experience?
Oh yeah. I feel the communion of saints in
There
worship
you go.
in
That's
my
it.
evangelical, like, smoke and light shows church. I can feel the communion
That
of
makes
saints.
it easier. Yeah. We call that polymodal, right? Because it's the smell and the sound. And
I think I'm not necessarily disagreeing with your point as much as it's almost I'm just asking for a little more humility in understanding what the church is for.
Yes. So maybe listen to yourself when you mention
in
that.
a way that's all inclusive. Does that make sense? I think that this is a good. You can say it's a good of the church to experience community. But
the name of church
what is
means
the
community.
church for? I mean, that question is such a big question. One almost has to.
I have a great live stream on it.
That answer, I mean, from God Himself. Anyway, that.
Well, actually, you do have your answer.
We might be talking past each other, but
okay, no, we're not. No, we're not. So you want to go scriptural based. So I went secular. I'll go scriptural based. Okay, so you're a Christian. So the big difference, why it's so important that ecclesia means community, is the reason why Jesus is special and unique. So in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy, we have the Shema prayer, right? To love God with all of your body and your spirit and your soul and your strength, right? You're familiar with that in Deuteronomy, the Shema prayer. You're supposed to pray that every day when you wake up, right? And then in Leviticus, there's a separate mitzvah that says to love yourself as you love your neighbor, right? So this is why Jesus is so unique, because he said community. Because he said, when he was asked, what is the ultimate commandment? Did he give one commandment? No, he gave them both, because there is no separation between the Shema, loving God with all your spirit, strength, and whatever you want to translate it as. There's no separation between loving yourself as you love your neighbor and loving God. That's all the same thing. That's the koinonia idea. So this is what I'm talking about. What's special about Jesus' ministry is he said, wait a minute, right? There's no separating loving God and loving yourself and your neighbor, right? And I have a whole issue with Augustine's argument that we don't need to be taught how to love ourselves, but that's what I'm getting at. So if Jesus, your whatever, right? If Jesus says, well, no, the ultimate commandment here is to love God with all of your essence and to love yourself as you love your neighbor. That's where we're failing in modern day. We don't love ourselves, so how can we love our neighbor? But that's what I mean by community, right? That's community. It's not seeing the Samaritan as something separate from. You get what I mean?
Get in here, Phlebas. All right. So I wanna jump in, see if this relates, see how I'm tracking with it, because what comes to mind is, Peter Rollins has a series of teachings on the difference between community and communion.
Mhm.
And the way that he describes it is, he says community is a group of people gathered around essentially a set of ideas. It's people gathered around
Shared.
shared belief, but it's almost like it would almost, I think it's tied to propositional tyranny and ideology, really. And he describes communion as people that are gathered around a common lack. And psychoanalytically, he describes like true religion as freedom from the libidinal pursuit of the lack, that which promises to make you whole and complete. And I think that's tied back to what Jess and I were talking about earlier of like, what does it mean? How do you sacrifice for the sake of the other, even your own idea of self-sacrifice?
I remember you mentioned that. Yes. Yeah. Well, I answered in the chat that the way the Buddhists explain this is what you're sacrificing is the self that isn't whole. In Buddhism, we call it the alaya vijnana. It's a type of consciousness that isn't pure. It's translated as the storehouse of the self. So in a modern context, I translate it as the configuration file of the self. Right? You get what I mean from computer ideas. It's I like blue, I don't like green, I like coffee, I like tea. So what we're giving up is all of these hangups, these even traumas in a sense, right? That have Nietzsche called it ressentiment. He stole it from the French. It means to re-experience. That's what trauma is. But what he was saying is we're such a reactive species that we get so harmed growing up that we stopped reacting to the present, basho, place, that we're reacting to previous experience. How many people do you know that are reactive? You say something, they take it the wrong way, they flip out.
Stop reading my mail.
Exactly. So I think that's this relational thing. So it's a two-way street. And that's where I think Augustine failed, because Augustine in his on Christian doctrine said that, well, we all know we don't need to be taught to love ourselves. That's a failure. That's what Carl Jung said blew his mind when he went and looked at the wholeness perspective of the East, because they saw the greater picture, right? Whereas us, oh shit, I got to get this. I'm sorry, guys. It's my
Okay. All right. Pause. I'll take you off for right now. We'll add him back in. Wow. I don't know his actual name besides maybe, hopefully we'll just call him Al. It's great. I mean, that's like, I feel like God just gave me an experience of myself, but just like with more, but like more well-read.
Luke, let's see if we can make a whole face. Wait, what do we do?
No, other way.
Oh.
Two Lukes. Wait, I gotta get closer. This is so weird. It's like we're kissing or something.
That is like, see, Al, that's welcome to a Luke stream. We're just like, this.
It's a Luke sandwich.
Let's make two faces.
A Luke sandwich. Yeah, I think maybe I'm in a period of more like, I don't know, radical epistemological humility, but I think I have given up on this idea of like having some kind of unified theory of everything. And I think that's a little bit of my pushback.
I would argue that's the myth of an objectivist epistemology, like thinking that you can contain I think it's tied all the way back to Adam and Eve, and thinking you can understand God and evil, thinking that you can contain all of that within your mind when it's meant to be something much more I don't know, much bigger and simpler in a lot of ways. I think that's the knowing as you are known, which goes all the way back to why I think TLC is functionally this way, and it's about persons, is that it's not rooted in that's fundamentally why we're not ideological. Like theoretically, disagreements, even relational disagreements, should not create division. If that's that Rod Hare quote of like, the quality of a relationship is inversely proportional to the number of subjects that are off the table. Like if your commitment is to the person, it doesn't matter what they think about any idea. I mean, ultimately,
right.
And I think that's what we're going for. And I mean, I'm as guilty of it as probably a lot of people, trying to have some sort of grand theory of everything. I mean, that's probably what a lot of the pushback to my universalism is they think that my universalism is some grand theory of everything, you know? And I think And I think in as much as I'm trying to have a grand theory of everything, look at this guy. Look at that.
Oh, this is awesome.
In as much as I'm trying to make that a grand theory of everything, because even that, I would argue probably psychologically, psychoanalytically, that trying to have a grand theory of everything is part of the death drive. You're trying to like save yourself from fear of death. Like if I can just understand it all, then I'm okay. The same way that Christians treat resurrection. Like, oh, I have this resurrection thing. Well, that saves me
have
from
it.
death.
That's your whole language is perfect. That
Yeah.
you can have it. You can't have it, right? And I think that's where the participation language is so helpful, because you can participate in it, which is not a mode of having, it's a mode of, sharing in this experience that's greater, glimpsing of it. But yeah, I think that having language, it puts your finger exactly on the problem. Yeah.
And that, I mean, Gregory, this is old. I mean, it's not new. This is where, like, even in the this is what I found in Eastern Christianity. Gregory of Nyssa says things like that. Like, religion is the process of salvation is moving from the realm of having into being.
Yeah, Sherry just put that in the
Did
comments.
she? Oh, Sherry is kind of like an older homesteading female me.
Yeah.
Except I feel like I'm more emotionally feminine and she's more emotionally and relationally masculine.
Oh, that blurry shit just ruins everything.
Celtic?
I was just gonna say, when it comes to what you guys are talking about, what I recommend people to do is to look into the Celtic faith, because Celtic Christianity is much closer to the Eastern, but it's a blend. It's beautiful because, and this is what
very interesting. Agreed.
Because the what happened was the Celts, I won't say the dirty word, but the Celt priests of the time likely didn't die out. They just converted to Christianity. So they took this love of scholarship and language and brought that into the church. So, but yeah, this past Christmas, this is an awesome book if you guys are ever looking. It's Celtic Prayers.
No, Philip Newell. I know he does a lot of retreats in those regions.
And this was a retreat to the island of off of Scotland. And so it's one of our oldest traditions. It's beautiful.
There's something about Celtic Christianity that's, Sherry and I talk about this a lot too, that's very interesting to me. Paul Kingsnorth is into that because I think I'm mainly ethnically Scotch-Irish, and there's just something very romantic about, because it was founded theoretically by St. Peter, or not, I mean St. Not St. Peter, St. Patrick. Yeah. And then it was buffered. It was because they were so, all those like the Picts, the Celts, the Gaels, all those people that were kind of native to the Isles were protected from the English, and they fought with them forever. And like, so their Christianity, I mean, you probably know the histories of this stuff better than me, was buffered from the kind of westernized Christianity that took over the south.
I'm actually named after the oldest language extant in the world, which is the Om alphabet in Ireland, which is actually relates to Sanskrit, which is really interesting. But that's actually a flattening of history. What was actually, I think, the reason why the Celts were never conquered by the Romans was because even though there's the Irish Celts, and then there's the Ionians, and then there's the people off the shore of the west coast of Ireland, and then the Scots and the Welsh, but even the Gaels and like the French and northern India, they still had this the sharing of weal and woe. You get what I mean? Like, they weren't directly related, but they considered themselves as part of the same people. And I think that's something we've lost, right? We're losing our culture and our identity. And I think that's why the Celtic identity stood for so long until the modern era. They pretty much erased it now. But that's why it survived up until, the 1800s, right? Is because they still had their culture, their identity, and even their language. Like, I was raised with Gaelic in the home. In Canada, of all things, so I think that's why these cultures last. And I think when, like, I'll give you an example. My wife is Roman Catholic, and it breaks my heart that she was never taught anything about her Bible, right? And it just breaks my heart because she's a wonderful, God-fearing, loving woman, but she was raised to be so averse to all of it because of how it was taught, and I think we can change that overnight by switching to, I think the Celtic, there's another book, I was trying to find it, Anam Cara. Have you guys ever heard of that book, Anam Cara? It's a
Mm-mm.
really famous Christian book. I'll put it to the chat and I'll find it for you here. It's really interesting because it's called Soul Friend. It's Gaelic for soul friend, and that's what we're missing. So he's actually a Catholic, but of Irish descent, and he talks about the rich history of the Irish and how they infused this idea of a universal family. You get what I mean? And so this Anam Cara is a soul friend. In the modern context, I think what we would see it as like a soul spiritual advisor. But the way I would argue is we should see a soul friend in everyone. You get what I mean? Like everyone you commune with, you should look inside to find that little bit that might teach you or inspire you, or I don't know. I recommend that book. Anam Cara. I'll get you a link.
I see a soul friend in you, Al.
That's awesome. John O'Donohue. John O'Donohue is the author of the book.
Ethan, do you have more thoughts?
Well, I got like a million questions for Jess, but that's a different day. And I had to come say hello to you because I've missed you, Luke Freeman.
Hey,
I
bud.
texted you.
Yeah.
And then Al, what brought you out of the lurk today? Well, like not out of the lurk, because I met you on Discord, we were messaging, but I'm curious, like, what made you come on camera?
It's because they kept, they were really making me mad because they kept talking about how we need to take away children's cell phones. So I had to get on and say, no, don't do that.
He owns a cell phone dealership.
Yeah, a cell phone dealership. Yeah.
I want to get all these good cell phones.
Like I'm a contrarian for many reasons, and that's an example. So I explained it earlier. I grew up on a farm. And so technology hit me hard. I was a banker in finance for years. And so I used Nokias and Blackberries. And then eventually it was iPhones. And so my life was completely changed. My mind was changed. Like I went hunting once and I literally broke down and cried because it was like I had spent years in stressful environment, right? The phone was always going off. Literally kids nowadays have psychosomatic vibration in their pocket. And that's what happened to me, right? So what I did was, well, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being the slave to a phone. Like I hated it to begin with, but it had still, even though I hated the cell phone and the tether, it still changed my psychology. So what I did is I changed.
So you want to punish the children?
No, I changed my relationship, right? So instead of having, why did I need internet on my phone? Back then, I used, how I got around it, I used, Google had a turn-by-turn direction via SMS, right? So I found a way to use the phone strictly as an information tool, a device, not as a tether, you know what I mean? It took a few years, but now my phone, I love my phone because audiobooks, searching, I use AI, and that's what I'm finding. I talk to AI every day. And AI tells me it's a small portion of people using the AI to make themselves better. Most people are using it to offload the work, right? So for what I do is I'll put in a half dozen or a dozen prompts into the AI. Then I'll ask it to collate it into a script for me, right? And then we'll edit that script. Whereas most other people will go, well, give me a script based on this subject. I don't do that. I tell it what I want it to say, right? And I think that's what's happening here. It's a lack of authentic engagement in anything. You know what I mean?
Does AI know what better is?
No, it only knows better. Don't be pedantic. But what I mean is I'm severely dyslexic. So I operate mostly from voice to text, right? So because of the way I read, I tend to miss a lot of my typos because it's the way a dyslexic mind works. We recognize words by sight, not by reading, right? So I needed the AI to, like, for example, when I first started writing, I had one friend say, like, what did a fifth grader write that? Like in one of our emails, was because, typing on a little device and, so that's what I'm getting at here. There's so few people using AI to see that we can actually teach kids to read who we think are unable to read, right? Dyslexics, that's a misnomer, right? But I could go from there, but that's my point, right?
What if dyslexics are just dumb?
They're not actually. No, I know. I think it's funny. I take this shit too seriously. But the reason why I take exception to that is even the AI failed, right? Because I punched this in. Oh, even better. So I was talking to a programmer. I'm trying to give him some advice. Talking to a computer programmer, and I was recommending that he learn about philosophy and other stuff because it'd make him a better programmer. And here's proof in the pudding. Because I said to him, I said, what percent of the population do you think has dyslexia? I said, well, first, I said, you're missing out on a huge portion of the population not taking into accessibility in your device as a programmer. He said, oh, well, we have a whole department for that. It's called user experience. Yeah, UX. UX is not accessibility. So I said, how many people do you think, so I'll ask you guys, what percent of the population do you think is diagnosed dyslexic? He guessed 1%. It's 20%. 20% is diagnosed. But here's the problem. The reason why I was diagnosed is I'm Canadian. So our school boards have all the money in the world. And because they skipped, they held me back a couple grades, not knowing I was learning disabled, they paid the thousands of dollars to have me tested. So I've gone in with AI. I've even, like I said, Marianne Wolf agrees with this idea that if only 20% are diagnosed, the likelihood that 60 to 80% of the population has some sort of learning issue is almost guaranteed. So when I mention this to programmers that like Audible, Hoopla, all of these book apps, very few of them have a dyslexic font option, and even less of them will advertise that. You get what I mean? So I
What
argue
is a dyslexic font?
it's just it depends. Sometimes it's a contrast issue. My favorite dyslexic font is they put kind of like a score at the bottom. So instead of being all over, it helps you look it up. You'll find it interesting, and you'll probably be able to see if you have some sort of an issue. Because if you look at two texts, one is what most people get versus a dyslexic font. If you find the dyslexic font easier to read, you might be part of that 80%, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I argue what we're doing right now is the Prussian model. We're sinking most of our boats trying to make everyone fit into, right? Where I argue everyone's atypical, right? We all learn very,
Fits right with my personalism. And that goes with Shankenstein's comment here is like literacy is not a native human trait. Well, yeah, because it's assuming it's a medium. People books are so ubiquitous, and they have been they've been preeminent for so long that people are just like, that's just the way
audiobooks,
literacy and humans work. And I'm like,
but remember, that's recent history, right? After the Gutenberg, right? And I argue this is where I go and I build. Yes, and I build on McLuhan. He said that made us a global and a trans time type species, right? Because for the first time ever, could your words travel across the globe and through time, but no longer. McLuhan didn't see we'd get to this point where information is temporary, right? When I first started learning the internet, well, websites were up for years. Now, blog posts are up for a day and then they're gone. You know what I mean? So now we're a very temporary species. But before the Gutenberg, whatever you want to call it, revolution, we were an oral species, right? Like the Hebrew faith, the Irish faith was all oral for centuries. So I argue it's actually like a modern, what would you call it? Like a modern bias to look, oh, well, yeah, for the last couple hundred years, we've been obsessed with books, but for thousands of years before that, we were storytellers, right? So I think that's where we're failing, to not look. That's my argument, that the meta-modern approach to everything is necessary. Because I say there's never been so many literate people in the world, but never so few fluent people. Do you get what I mean?
Say that again. Sorry.
There's never been so many literate people that can read and write, right? Because when we test people, you're only getting a small little portion of text, but so few fluent people that can read a book. Like when I was talking about that seminar about students, they were talking about, well, Dostoevsky. Seriously? No kid's going to jump into Dostoevsky. Like what I recommend people, even adults, start reading things like The Little Prince. Believe it or not, it's a kid's book, but it has wonderful philosophy within it,
Everyone who I know who I think is wise and highly intelligent loves that book.
Well, I use it to teach what I call code switching. I think, as Schopenhauer said, we learn another language not to speak it, right? Because I know a bunch of languages that I don't speak, but we learn another language so we can separate words from ideas, right? So I actually recommend people, and this is, sorry?
I said saucy. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. And so what I argue is people are missing that depth of the engagement. So I actually recommend people take up reading, and this is where people fail. Not so that you can go out and order a beer at the bar, but just to hear the beauty of the language. So I recommend people to listen to the Little Prince in French and follow along in English, right? And maybe even vice versa. Believe it or not, you don't even have to speak the language. It's like the Latin liturgy. It gets you out of yourself. It's hard to explain, but that's why I recommend that book. But I also do it with Camus' Stranger, right? That's a great one because his French is kind of advanced, but not terribly advanced. And you could listen to it and follow it along in English. And believe it or not, you pick up a lot more than you'd think because 70% of English is loanwords. And just people never try that. But that's my recommendation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What's coming to mind is I think it was this guy Owen Cyclops. He's a cartoonist that does like different. He's into philosophy and esotericism and Christianity. And anyway, yeah, he did this Twitter post, and it was like he just had he just had a baby with his wife, and so baby's growing up, and then he was wondering how early is too early to introduce the baby to language. I was
it.
like, and then he just went off for a little while, just sort of thinking about the benefits of sort of remaining in a pre-linguistic phase. And then
Like
language
cell
is
phones.
being
Give
forced
them
on children
language
too
when you
early.
give them language when you give them a cell phone.
Well, to be a
That's right.
contrarian here, I think that's what we're going to look at in the future is that we're seeing language evolve in real time, right? Like I argue memes, not the old mimetic idea, but this modern idea of meme is an evolution of language, right? Because remember, words fail to share what our ideas really are, right? And I think memes get there much closer. And I think arguably, I don't know. I have a weird theory that I believe. See, Nietzsche had this thought experiment. He said, what if we were lost in the woods? Would we have need for language? And I argue, absolutely. Because it's language that allows us to think and conceive and know who we are. Like the example I give, a feral child. If you find a feral child in the woods, do they have language of any kind? Right?
Never met one.
Well, they don't, right? In
Okay.
fact,
Wouldn't
what
that
we've
be
seen,
original participation?
what?
Pre-language, original participation, Owen Barfield. I mean,
No, what I mean is our
that
definition of
idea.
language
You
fails, right?
anyway.
No,
If you don't have language, you don't have concepts. You don't
Yes,
understand.
exactly.
You can't differentiate yourself from the environment.
Exactly.
To me, that would be original
Exactly.
participation. Yeah.
I don't
Yes.
know that it's exactly
agree.
original participation, but it's like it's a step of I think of it as Barfield has his I think of it as his figurations level of perception. Because he has figurations, beta thinking, alpha thinking, or alpha thinking, beta thinking. And the figurations is almost like the pre-verbal thing that like babies once they can focus on something and like see something, they can see a tree or they can see your face, but they don't associate that with any language. Like but original participation people had language, but they were still somewhat in I think of original participation as like merely sincerity culture, but whatever.
Okay. So you guys are talking about
Sorry.
like pre-language cultures is what you mean by that. Is that what you mean when you were
Or pre-self-aware in like an authentic individual way culture
when would
is
that be?
original
I had this.
participation, I think.
Would it
I
be
had this-
before written language is kind of would typify it? Like you talking about the Celts. I mean, the thing
I think
thought
that's an
about
interesting idea. Before Gutenberg, I think that's
Yeah.
when you had more of original participation.
See, I go
Yeah.
back
the thing I
further.
was thinking about, Al, with the Celts is they preserved more of an indigenous relationship with their environment. And
Yes.
they
with the
incorporated
environment.
Christianity into that. And
Exactly.
to me, there's something about that is evocative of that idea of the original
I gotcha.
participation. But I mean,
Well,
Isn't
see,
there
the
a
reason
theory
why I
that
asked,
that
inputs
language
from,
was originated in order to coordinate hunting?
well, no, hold
There,
on. No, there was
it's
no
a pointer.
coordination. Believe it or not, I grew up a hunter, and there's no talking in hunting. It's actually, so here's a thought experiment that I invented if you guys are interested. So I argue, think about our pre-language. So like what I say is like, what were we say 100,000 years before Göbekli Tepe, right? So before civilization, before language, like, are you thinking, and this is my argument, look at, there's a recent site that was just discovered and some of the oldest pictographs on the planet. So we're talking tens of thousands, maybe even 1 million years ago. So these people put their hand up on a rock and painted it, or painted animals. That takes a level of cognition that is not our definition of language, but it has to be a form of language. We fail in our definitions, is what I'm arguing, right? Like, what we conceive as language is not simply words or gestures. It's much more than that, right? Like, think of language, 80% nonverbal. So arguably language is only 20% verbal, right? Or words. I don't know. That was the thought experiment. Like, what were we like before we had language, but we definitely had cognition and empathy, and you get what I mean?
Listen, what about these autistes that are hanging out on the hill, telepathically talking to each other? What's going on with that, huh?
I don't know.
Coordination.
Huh?
I don't know. Even William James, the famous psychiatrist, actually suspended his judgment. And he didn't have the guts to publish the book while he was alive, but he updated his pragmatism with what he called radical empiricism. And even he said, well, all of this fails. So there has to be something else. And what I would call it was, it's like he called it an external consciousness we tap into. And I think that inspired Jung to come up with his collective unconscious. He called it the induction, right? Would be pulled down from heaven. And I argue that those pre-verbal beings had a stronger connection to the induction mainline, if that makes sense. You know,
I was reading some random papers on, what was it? Cognition and linguistics, or specifically cognition and metaphors. And there's these experiments done, maybe you're familiar with them, about how intrinsic metaphor is to us, and how it affects our thoughts of one subject or another. And so I think the most well done ones, or the ones that are able to that offer the clearest results, is time space distinctions. And often we'll think of time in terms of space. So we'll talk about moving forward in time or looking back in time, or so that's mapping on a spatial framework onto time, and then using that to think about time. And then they would do experiments where they had the participants engage in some sort of spatial problem or spatial game, and then ask them questions about time. And based on the spatial game, they would offer different responses, or they would be inclined to different ways of thinking about how time was. What was it? Forget what that had to do with anything. But it has to do with sort of like what
you were talking about, how metaphor, how we use metaphor and language to understand our world and ourselves. Is that
I guess because this is getting to what is, what's this thing that's underlying language? That's, is there a language underneath language? The universal grammar, or the Platonic forms, or
the archetypes to Jung, or
or when you're pre-linguistic, what's in your imaginal that is enabling you to coordinate groups of people on a hunt? So everyone look here, focus on this, or to maintain a village where you're like, this is allowed in, this should be kept out. Those seem to be like these symbolic, is this what Jonathan Peugeot's getting at with these symbolic things? So these are the when you're pointing at something and you're saying, look at this specific thing, even McGilchrist even talks about this in terms of the hemispheres. Like, one hemisphere, that's its job, is to specify something, and then the other job of the other hemisphere is to look at the whole.
Hold on. No, hold on. I've heard you talk about Ian McGilchrist's. It's not. So what happens is we have a left and right. So, and together they give us the whole picture. You know what I mean? Like, so one, the left is very, very pedantic, right? And whereas the right is very metaphorical. But the wholeness, and I know you might just be pedantic about the word, but what McGilchrist is getting at is we're so left concentric that we don't have the ability to see from the right perspective, and thus don't have the ability to see
Right.
wholly. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
way
that's
too
fair.
left centric. You know?
It's
Yeah.
periphery and focus.
But
Yes.
it seems like even that's the masculine and feminine, like the
Anima and animus.
yeah. So the feminine's more concerned with what's inside and outside,
Mhm.
and then the masculine's more concerned with the specificity of one thing or another. And well, I don't know. See, it's like those are sort of at the foundation of things, and then the language gets built up from there in order to do, well, whatever we need to do.
Well, you know what I thought you were getting to with that, believe it or not, is I
What?
thought you were going to bring up McLuhan, right? Because it fits both your
I'm
statements.
not too familiar with McLuhan, so
Doesn't
Okay, well-
matter. Bring them up.
Well, it's
Yeah.
the language, right? So McLuhan said we use language to externalize ourselves, our very being, so that we could, I can't remember his exact words, it was brilliant, but so that we could cognize or understand the world, right? And so I think that's what you're getting at, this idea that, right, we don't just use language, but we use everything about ourselves. But so he went metaphysical in the sense, and I think this is why, to transcend the words, what we call language. So we externalize ourselves, our very being, because as you say, metaphorical, right? I think of Tibetan Buddhism. There's a really famous lady by the name of Helena Blavatsky. She was a famous theosophist, and she explained this. Well, she explained, no, don't
Gentlemen,
worry
plug
about
your
that.
ears.
Yeah, no, but I'm just using it as she gave a great example. So she was explaining this idea of how our mind kind of is a pattern recognition machine. So she said, when you look off in the distance and there's a mirage, right? You will see in the distance, you might perceive a horse, right? But if you've never seen a horse before, that isn't what you're going to perceive off in the distance, right? So that's why I like
resonance, no memory.
Yeah, and that's why I like Vervaeke's perspectival knowing. He fails to explain that we need to be educated and the imagination and the induction, and then we can have perspectival knowing. But that's what I thought you were going to get at, this idea that now we're having trouble recollecting ourselves. You get what I mean? We've so externalized ourselves in our world. You know?
Right. Okay, quick thing. I'm going to leave and just listen to you guys. Al? Should I call you Al?
Yeah, it's just Al. That's my name.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
then
it's a funny play on. Yeah, it's a funny play on things. Yeah.
Okay. So, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you.
I'm sorry, I'm such a chatty bastard and such a contrarian. But
listen,
it's the way
listen.
I am.
You haven't jumped on screens before, so you have to learn. You've never seen a horse before, so you got to learn this. Know how to.
Well, he's not wrong. Like, he's right. Like, when I go on
ICC,
Discord, I get so frustrated because no one seems to want to actually have a conversation. So yeah, he's right.
It's a different
easier
thing.
in video.
It's learning hospitality. It's learning love. Breathe in, breathe out. Okay, I'm gonna keep listening. This is good.
My favorite
But
word.
Luke, I think Nate's gonna have a hernia if you don't read that quote he emailed you. Did
Which
you see
one?
that?
That he emailed me?
He said he emailed you something. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fine. I will check.
I think his
this
head's gonna
before I leave.
explode if you don't read that.
Okay. Well, I don't want Nate to explode since he's been so generous with me in letting me use all this. Where is it?
Oh, it's
Check
something about a
me.
book, I think.
It's about a book. Check
I
your
think so,
email.
yeah.
He has a quote.
God does not want me to check it. It says it's connecting.
Technology, eh? When I was a kid, they put us on a computer before there was really any computers. It was called the Burroughs Icon. The Ontario government had a computer designed just for us. And I was just a little kid. And they told us by the time I was your age, everyone's going to know how to program and they're going to understand how computers work. And this is what I mean by we've never had so many literate people and so few fluent. So the example I give is, and if you ever want to challenge somebody on faith, this is the example I give. Every single person that I know will flip the switch, the light switch in their home, and just they will have absolute faith that the light will come on, right? But I always ask them, but you don't have the faintest clue how electricity works, yet you have absolute faith that it'll work. You get what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to read. I'm reading his thing. How long is this, Nate? Okay, it's not that bad. All right. I'm reading. All right. From Esther Meek, it would be a mistake to see presence. It would be a mistake to see presence, this philosophically significant phenomenon, as absolute ordinary, originary. It is not Descartes' cogito. It is not the case that the you, that is you, begins alone. In my presentation, I have located presence within a larger arc of welcome. Presence cannot be presence too, apart from the becoming, quote, other. It's not hard to see that the welcoming of another composes you from the very beginning of your life. For every surviving human being in the world, there is a primal welcome. And this primal welcome is fraught with philosophical consequence, fundamentally shaping your intimate, responsive relatedness to the real, inaugurating what I will designate, quote, a metaphysics of childhood. It forms our fundamental orientation to the real, and it plays into any particular venture toward the world. Balthazar philosophized about the mother's smile. The little child awakens to self-consciousness through being addressed by the love of his mother. The entire paradise of reality that unfolds around the, quote, I, stands there as an incomprehensible miracle. It is not thanks to the gracious favor of the I that space and the world exist, but thanks to the gracious favor of the thou. Being and love are coextensive. In that beauty-filled, love-brimming face, a face that was looking for us before we were looking for it, it is the gift of an intimate welcome home to belong in this world. A personal other preceding you has been looking for you, and now freely, generously, rapturously welcomes you specifically. The infant-mother encounter could not be more intimately interpersoned. It takes the form of a personal address, a personal gesture of welcome. It is the real inviting the infant to communion. You, the infant, are on the receiving end. You are met with rapturous delight in you. She names you. Your first welcome. It would be a mistake to see presence. Is that, well, that's the same thing. Okay, it's doubled. Anyhow, so that's it.
I think it's beautiful.
Mhm.
In fact, I would recommend Hannah Arendt's, her thesis. She had to stop it when she escaped the Nazis, but she finished it throughout her entire life. And she was obsessed with this very idea, caritas, which is the Greek translation. And what's funny is they had to translate the one Hebrew word, chesed, into 4 different Greek words. This idea of love that will forgive any trespass. You know what I mean? That the love that we're meant to embody. And yeah, I love that. That was a great passage.
All right. Well, since Jess left, I'm going to ask for final words.
That was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great. I love people coming out of the lurk. Jessica, next time. Jessica,
You're
I know
on
you're probably at
notice.
work. You're walking those dogs, but next time. Okay, Luke.
No, it's great. Glad it worked out. Yeah, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
And as a
Great to
final,
meet you, Al.
I'm sorry, but before we go, I just want to point out yet another failure of translation that I see. William Branch, by the way, hi. I always enjoy his conversations, but he mentions the meek, and I just want to point out. I know Jordan Peterson talks about meek, but it's not what we think. So I actually usually share the Canadian national anthem. That's this resonance, this idea of what is the meek in the Bible.
Canada.
No. In French, actually, it's "Quatre son bras sait porter l'épée." As your arm knows how to carry the sword, il sait porter la croix. You also know how to carry the cross, right? So this idea, not that you're weak or meek, but you could strike, but you forgive. That's that chesed I mentioned, right? But even more beautiful in France, la croix is not just cross, but it's also right. So it's your arm carries the sword, but you also carry the right. If you get what I mean, the logos. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Good final word. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody, for coming. Till next
Salut.
time. Peace out. In stream.